All right.
And sat down and y'all looking at me and I'm like.
Okay, everybody.
Oh, no.
Good evening. I would like to call the operating work group meeting to order. It is March 11th, 2024. We do have some written statements submitted for this meeting. There were 22 in total. 6 in support of the community schools teams who contribute to a holistic approach to education that goes beyond the classroom. 14 in support of the continuation and expansion of community schools as a equity strategy. 1 in support for goal 3 of the strategic framework in the 24-25 budget development. And then 1 in support of the board evaluating the current insurance offerings through courts. Then moving on, we have some public speakers, about 5.
6 public speakers. Our first one is new.
Hi. I'm sorry, you were going in and out. Did you give me
Yes.
permission to speak?
You're
Yes,
good.
you're first to go whenever you're ready.
Okay, thank you. My name is Go Nu Vang Vu. I'm the school principal at Lakeview Elementary School. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to share my voice this evening. Just want to talk a little bit about the importance of community schools and the role of our village builders. Lakeview has been a community school for 6 years now, and we have done some tremendous work building around not just our school community, but our larger community here on the north side to be this wraparound hub for our students and families. And one of the critical roles in this community school concept is the role of the village builders. We have been so fortunate in the last 2 years to have village builders be a part of our school team. At Lakeview, we use them intentionally to support our students and their learning throughout the school day. Specifically, as we think about our priorities and focus on early literacy, we have strategically scheduled our village builders to support our students in grades kindergarten, 1st, and 2nd. Going even deeper, they are in the classroom during the literacy time, and they play a really key critical role. With coaching from myself and from my instructional coaches, they are actually one of the additional adults in the classroom to provide small targeted instructional groups to support our students with their early literacy skills. As we think about understanding and recognizing and knowing letter names and letter sounds, knowing what onset sounds are, knowing what syllables are, they are collaborating and supporting our classroom teachers in providing those small targeted instructional groups. In addition to that, they're also that additional adult to provide that social emotional learning for our students, right? A lot of our students come in with varying degrees of skill sets, and to have that additional adult in the classroom to provide those social emotional skills and also those early literacy skills at the early ages, such as kindergarten and 1st grade, is only going to continue to build that momentum that we want for us as a school and for us as a district. I'm very happy to share as I look at our student data and I compare last year to this year. Last year at this time of the year, our kindergartners didn't make a whole lot of gains when we look at FastBridge and EL assessments. And I'm so proud to share that this year, at this time of the year, compared to last year's data, our kindergartners have made tremendous growth in FastBridge and EL assessment data. And this is due to the intentional use of the adults in the classroom to support early literacy. And our village builders play that key role. Thank you so much for giving me some time to share with you how Lakeview is operating as a community school and how we benefit, not just us, but our students and our whole community from these critical roles and from this concept of being a community school.
Next is Andy Jacobs.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes. Yep.
All right, great. Give me just a moment to move my cursor. So thank you all for giving me the opportunity to speak in support of continued funding for the MMSD's Community Schools program. Over the past roughly 14 months, I've had the pleasure and opportunity to volunteer regularly with Lakeview Community School, K-5 school serving students living on Madison's northeast side. I am consistently grateful for the ways that Lakeview, through the community school model, helps to address student needs that are certain to be an obstacle to their learning. The community school funding ensures that all Lakeview students have access to morning snacks. It ensures that all Lakeview students have access to all the school supplies they need to engage in their learning effectively and thoroughly. And the community schools funding ensures that all Lakeview students have access to warm winter clothing. By meeting these daily or these seasonal recurring needs, the community schools model, I think, helps to alleviate or to remove some of the challenges and the concerns and the pressures that Lakeview students may experience, and to allow them to meet their school day with their greatest potential. I also have the opportunity to walk a group of Lakeview students to school every Friday morning. On a number of occasions, I've had students tug at my hand as we're walking to school to tell me about what they've recently learned and experienced at their cultural cooking club, which is a community schools funded program. I also have the opportunity one Monday a month to ditch out of work a little early and to partner with Lakeview in support of their monthly community food pantry. The need for this, the need to close this basic gap is clear and consistent month over month, season over season. And I want to thank you for your time. And thank you for consideration of continuing to fund the district's community schools program.
Our next speaker is Lori Lopez.
Good evening. My name is Lori Lopez, and I am the very proud principal here at Sandburg Elementary School. And I'm speaking with you all tonight in support of this community schools model that has very recently been implemented here at Sandburg. We started with community schools last year. And through the community schools model, we have been lucky enough to be allocated a community school resource coordinator, a family liaison, and 2 village builders. And these staff have been instrumental to the success of our students, the support of our staff, and the engagement of our families. At Sandburg, we have several single sections of ELI, and our village builders have been able to uplift and support the teacher and the students in those classrooms, particularly from an academic, engagement, and social emotional learning standpoint. This has been extremely helpful for us in kindergarten, especially as we help our youngest learners begin to develop those strong and healthy school habits. The work of our village builders has also been crucial in our 4th grade sections as they are getting acclimated to their 3rd classroom teacher due to a new allocation from the beginning of the year. And they have really been a consistent adult for those students as we've moved to find permanent staff for their classroom community. Our family liaison goes above and beyond to engage our families in the Sandburg community. She particularly does this through social media. If you're familiar with our 100 Days of Joy, that is is our family liaison, engaging our families daily through social media. She often works in partnership with our community school resource coordinator, Jeremiah, and together they have planned events such as Thanks a Brunch, Bingo, Read Your Heart Out, Carne Asada, and so much more. They have also put on Sandburg's first resource fair this school year. Without them, our school would not be able to seamlessly hold up traditions that have been known to Sandburg for many years and work to create new ones. In closing, Sandburg, as many of you know, is very much tucked away on the far east side of Madison, and we are a hub for our families, and they come to us when they need resources such as food and housing. Nearly weekly, we are welcoming new students and families not only to our city, but to our country. And because we have adopted the community schools model and we have these staff available, we are prepared to serve our families' needs and make sure that their students are successful here at Sandburg. So my sincere hope is that the MMSD School Board will continue this work in our school as well as other schools in the district. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Michael Jones.
Good evening. I wanted to start off by recognizing that my previous communication might have been determined impolite to various members of the school board. And I wanted to speak tonight a little bit about that. But first, I want to recognize and back up what New and Lori have both said as someone who has come to both of their schools and visited in various capacities, is that the Village Builders, the staff, and the community schools model is a very successful model and is something that our kids and our families need and deserve, which is why I, in some ways, spoke the way I did and have been very vocal about the need for balancing fiscal responsibility and looking at the quantitative data versus the qualitative data. There have been times as a union leader where I have walked into various schools and the conversation is about how to get the staffer asked me, how do I leave this school, or how do I find another district where my talents can be recognized? And we're trying to blunt that with making sure that people are not taking a significant pay cut in their salaries. It is really tough to build villages if your village builder leaves because they are taking a pay cut due to healthcare, cost of living adjustments, and various reasons. Over the weekend, MTI held activism fairs, and what we heard from students and parents as well as staff was not the quantitative numbers, but the quality of their education and what they deserve was extremely important. That's why the National Education Association, which means our members' dues, our money goes back into community schools for not just funding, but professional development and support for the work that New, Lori, and the staff are doing. We invest in ourselves, and that's why we need to not only support our community schools, but make sure that stability, which is one of the biggest hallmarks of community schools, maintains with a cost of living adjustment, maintains with, not just looking at these things as equity projects, but as long-term things to invest in, and the people, because it's easier to retain and it's cheaper to retain than it is to retrain someone if we're constantly going over turnover. And we do not want to have situations where schools like Lakeview and Sandburg are constantly having turnover because people are not feeling valued. But that will come in how you fund not only the community schools, but the people who are doing the work in the community schools, so that the kids who they see this year will be the same people they see next year. And that's what we need to come together on. We cannot do that, though, if the first offer is 0%, because that's a pay cut. And that is not only not acceptable to us, but that's not acceptable to our kids. And we need to recognize that before it's too late.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Sean Koval.
Hey, good evening, everybody. I'm Sean Koval. I'm representing myself tonight, and I'm speaking in celebration of the investments that have been made in community schools in the Village Builder program, and to encourage the board to continue that investment, to continue to grow those programs even after ESSER funds expire in June. I am a parent in the district, and I've also I've been back in the Madison area now for 5 years, and my background is in education policy and school leadership. And before I was in Madison, I was living and working in Oakland, which was the first full-service community school district in the country. And to be there and working in their community schools and learn about the model was the absolute professional highlight of my career to date. And a big reason why it was a highlight is because I saw an educational equity strategy that was working not only with the children that were in the school that often had a lot of unmet needs that they needed to have supported before they stepped in the classroom ready to learn, but also the families that were invited in to help create a vision for a school, to work structures that are set up within community schools, such as the ones in Madison, to share, to develop and share a vision for what academic success can look like based on the individualized needs of that community, and that and the students and families that call that school their hub for community resources. So in moving back, I was really excited to know that MMSD had started community school work those years ago, and I've been excited to see it grow since. I've spent time in my work life in the four, what I call kind of first generation community schools: Leopold, Mendota, Lakeview, and Hawthorne. And what I saw there in my time there has been the community school coordinators wearing many hats to be sort of the connective tissue and glue of those school communities. They're helping facilitate individualized learning experiences, helping organize different social emotional programs, family engagement, family wellness. And this is all, these are all practices and program offerings that should be considered core instructional offerings in these particular schools. We know that the schools that have been targeted for community schools and village builders need a few more resources and need a particular set strategy in a lot of cases to help make sure everybody is included, to help look at what is needed, and to help facilitate the vision, the shared vision of that school community. Community schools provides an integrated framework for that. I'm so glad to hear other people also celebrating what they have seen in these schools. And I would really say that, I would consider this, as a resident, as somebody who's familiar in community schools and other urban school district settings, this should be considered an academic, not only an academic achievement strategy, it should, but also it's really aligned to a lot of the other strategic goals in my reading of the MMSD strategic plan, whether it be Black excellence or providing individualized supports for all in schools. I really think that this is a strategy that can undergird a lot of the other strategic plan work that has already been identified. And I would encourage you all to continue the investment as much as possible, even though there's tough budgetary decisions coming up. It's an evidence-based strategy that really every urban public school district is implementing in some way, shape, or form, because it works and because that they've seen success. And so I would encourage you all to continue to consider how to make community schools a strategy that continues for the next 10, 15, 20 years. Because often the outcomes, as Michael was saying, there's quantitative and qualitative outcomes, and you can look at both to assess community schools, but some of those outcomes come out in the 5, 8, 10-year standpoint. And so we're still relatively early on in our investment in community schools here locally, it would be my view. And I really hope that we continue to do that, because it can be transformational and already has been in the short term. Thank you.
Thank you. Our final speaker is Carrie Modavila. Don't see her online. I did forward her the link again, so if you wanna move forward and we come back, or do you want me to try to get a written statement?
Yeah, let's try and get a written statement.
Okay,
Thank you. Okay, but yeah, if she gets back online, we can,
Yep.
yeah.
Okay.
All right, so on to the minutes. I move to approve the minutes from the operations work group meeting dated February 12th, 2024.
Second.
Second board member Muldrow, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And motion carries 7-0. Okay, so for tonight, thanks everyone for tuning in. We have a packed agenda this evening. We'll have a quick update or just an update on the long-range facilities plan, but forecasting that we will have a special meeting to deep dive that plan in April. We will then discuss the 2040 sustainability goals and investments required and any necessary changes we as a board will make. And then the biggest item tonight be our budget development, primarily considering healthcare and the equity projects. It's no secret that we are in a challenging budget environment with one-time ESSER funding ending and a funding formula that's not consistent with inflation. We have the difficult task of molding this budget to our values. We will have to make difficult decisions in order to maximize the value in this budget for our community. But I just want to make one thing very clear. We as a board will put people at the center. For every budget cycle, this budget has been a living document. Over the past few months, this board has made it clear that we have to make sure we center people, and we as a board, district partners, and community need to work in partnership to find additional revenues to give our students and staff the schools they deserve. So tonight, we continue that work. Tonight, we'll talk about community schools, expanding the Grow Your Own Teacher program, full day 4K, and more, as well as trying to hold the line on as we face multi-million-dollar increases in healthcare from providers as those negotiations are ongoing. So I just want to really emphasize, let's say, focus on the goals that we have as a budget and for all of our partners tonight. So thank you.
Okay, welcome everyone. Savion, thank you for starting us off with those words. Some of my words I think are going to echo your sentiments as well. So we must be on the same brainwave here tonight. So this is an important part of an ongoing discussion that we have about both our renewable energy planning and a deeper dive into our budget process. And I just want us to step back a little bit and remember that this process takes place beginning in February with our staffing process. So tonight we're going to discuss our commitment to our equity projects and our facilities. We make these decisions alongside commitments to other budget areas, including staffing, insurance, compensation. So far, what I want us to all think about and acknowledge in terms of keeping people at the center and centering our educators and our children is that first and foremost, as a board, you all did everything in support of schools and getting them set up for success for teaching. This meant setting up schools so that we can hire and retain the best possible educators in MMSD. We have made significant investments, staffing and class size. We have increased elementary FTE by 129.4 people. That's a 9.4% change over last year. Middle school, we have increased by 58.8. That's a 10% change from last year. And high school by 40.5. That's a 5.6% change from last year. So this is an addition of 228.7 FTE in the workbook. This is an enormous investment in our schools, and we needed to do that first to get schools set up. We also adjusted within that number our K-1 class sizes, lowering these numbers by adding over 5 million in teachers in just those two grades. This represents an intentional investment in our youngest learners in our most diverse schools and in their social and emotional needs and academic priorities. This type of investment early in the district budget process was critical to supporting schools, children, and staff. So tonight, Bob is going to lead a conversation with our team about some proposed equity projects. These are further investments in our social and emotional supports that we are proposing, and includes work around our community schools and village builders. The community schools and village builder work is deeply supported by other organizations across our city and is truly a partnership that embraces the wider school communities. This work, formerly on ESSER, was designed to support the whole child and families, and we are really proud of the diverse set of staff members implementing and designing this work every single day. This work needs to continue for our children. Our children deserve to recover from the pandemic and thrive despite the ending of the federal funding. This is a targeted strategy aimed at our schools with the greatest populations of students of color across the district. While we do acknowledge there was a hiccup in this implementation during COVID and right after, we are really proud now of our intentional commitment to community schools and village builders in the budget, and we want to especially thank our Madison Foundation for Public Schools. They brought back $620,000 towards this project to support and implement the model. We'll also be talking about investments in 4K, mental health, student services salary compression, a grow your own to associate's degree, and sustainability work related to our facilities. So again, just to reiterate, this is a process. We started back in February, and we're taking the time between now and June to discuss our budget, build in those big rocks, staffing, compensation, equity projects, facilities. We get to also invest while we also take care to be fiscally responsible in our school district. So I know as a district, we're paying attention to each of these areas, and I want to thank all of you for being thoughtful about the ways in which these proposals support students and the ways in which we'll continue to talk about this over the coming months so that we can approve a preliminary budget in June and then a final budget in October. So that said, Bob, I will turn it over to you.
All right, thank you. So I want to kind of return to some of the comments Chair Castro made in terms of our goals and our core values. Kids first, our focus, our future is been our operating goal for this year with Lisa Cabinet. I want to spend some time talking about our strategic framework and our goals. Every child is on track to be ready for college, career, community. The district and every school is a place for children, staff, and families to thrive. And African-American children and youth excel in school. It's very important, I think, for us to continue to focus, which we have been doing the last several months, with those goals and our core values, which when we talk about the equity projects and even the sustainability goals the board has already with their resolution. It brings forth our core values of belonging, excellence, racial equity, and social justice, voice, focus, and creativity. So tonight specifically, I want to do a little bit of a summary. Mike, or Jen, I mean, is going to talk a little bit about our long-range facilities plan, kind of get us up to speed. I want to lead a continued conversation, getting the finer points of the sustainability goal, renewable energy goal focused or zero greenhouse gas emissions. I have a newsflash. I have a recommendation or kind of a way I'd like us to lean on that, but that'll be clear. And then finally, and probably most importantly, end the conversation with some steps moving forward on our budget goal development, really the focus on growing and some of the other issues. So the equity projects we want the board to consider maintaining as we move forward. So we're going to go right into the long range facilities plan, and Jen's going to take it away. And Jen, your shirt matches the color of the slides.
We did that on
Nice colorful.
All right, so I'm happy to share some updates. So we have some timeline updates. We are considering the resolution for renewable energy or zero greenhouse gas at the April operation work group. And then with a special to be determined board meeting to talk about the long-range facility plan. We've done a lot of work since February, and I'm gonna get into that in the next couple of slides. And then finally, we'll talk about the implementation issues, the renewable energy and zero greenhouse gas emissions that Bob will lead us in. So this should be familiar to you. We've seen this timeline before. We've seen now that lovely line is moving over, so we're now past March as we're going through this. The one thing that I want us to remember as we're looking at this timeline is that we want to take into account Dr. Gethard's transition and make sure that his vision and his values are going to be represented in the work that we're engaging in here in this process. So this timeline I want us all to think about as flexible to meet his vision and values. Next slide. We've had a lot of community engagement sessions since we've last met. We've had sessions that have been in Spanish, Hmong, and English. We've had American Sign Language translation at those meetings as well. You can see a presentation that we did recorded on our website under our Building Excellence page. We also added a virtual session on March 5th. And that virtual session, we asked when people registered what language they would like the session in. And of the session languages that were requested, we had folks indicate that they had a preference for sign language and Spanish. There were no requests for Hmong on that one. We've had great turnout. We're going to be seeing the results of these when we get into April, and we'll be able to translate some of the qualitative and quantitative findings. Next slide. Also, in conjunction with those engagement sessions, we've been running a online survey. That survey has been administered at the end of every community engagement session. We have a QR code that folks scan and do a quick entry of what their individual thoughts are. We've gotten a lot of feedback on that survey so far. I'm really happy with the results that we're getting in. We will be closing that survey today. And then we'll be looking at analyzing the results of that survey and again, presenting what we find in April at the next work group meeting. So the goals of that survey, just to remind you, are to look at the community's feelings and thoughts around 4 versus 20-year investment in our facilities. We wanted to understand their support around a middle school focus. We wanted to know also about how they felt about that operations component, because if we're thinking about a potential referendum, we're thinking about 2 separate questions that may show up, one operations, one facilities. And then we also wanted to see how they felt about some of the projects that were in operations, and then getting feedback on what we can do for the next steps. And with that, I hand it back over to Bob.
Thanks, Jen.
Mhm.
So just a bit of a recap in terms of the sustainability priorities. You all know the Board of Education's renewable energy to reach 100% by 2040 with some aggressive benchmarks in between, 50% by 2030, 75% by 2035. Just want to highlight the city of Madison has a similar sustainability goal with 2050 as a timeline, and then Madison Gas and Electric that has a goal of renewables by 2050, right? I did link in the next part of the slide, I did link the presentation that Design Engineers did back at the February Operations Work Group, and I want to spend time tonight to go through those 4 scenarios that were laid out, talk to you very high level in terms of using that presentation. And again, that presentation was done in coordination with Design Engineers, PRA, our experts that we hired to work with our facilities and the building services staff. But just want to lay out some of the issues that we're dealing with in terms of the implementation schedule that lies before us. Okay. So a summary of the scenarios that were laid out in that presentation. Scenario 1 was the Board of Education's resolution in 2019. Again, 50% renewable by 2030, 75% by 2035, and 100% renewable by 2040. Scenario 2, same timeline, 2040, but we're switching to zero greenhouse. We would switch to zero greenhouse gas emissions. Same timeline in terms of 50% reduction by 2030, 75% by 2035. And then finally, scenario 3A and 3B are again focused on zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050, but slightly different scenarios in terms of 3A is a constant rate of emissions and reduction, and then 3B talks about a constant rate of renovations in terms of meeting attending to school facilities at a constant pace between now and 2050. There's pros and cons to each one of these scenarios, and I just want to talk at a very high level for y'all to get a little bit closer to the ultimate goal. And the ultimate goal is by the April Board of Education meeting, really want the commitment from the board either to maintain our existing resolution, 2040 renewable energy, or to change that. And then do that in conjunction with our finalizing out that long range facility plan, which will then inform us in terms of the 24-25 operating and facilities budget and potential questions. Okay, this was noted by design engineers as part of that presentation in February, but I wanted to highlight it that the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the United Nations body that really assesses the science related to climate change, has a timeline to achieve zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050, right? So their standard of taking a look at sustainability as zero greenhouse gas emissions, United Nations worldwide talks about that timeline of 2050. Just so happens that our 2040 timeline for us is very difficult to achieve the renewable energy. I would even go so far as to say almost impossible for us to hit the 2040 renewable energy. 2040 zero greenhouse gas emissions, I think is doable, but very difficult. But I wanted to give you that base in terms of the standards that are being used by the United Nations, our utilities and other units of government in Wisconsin, right? It's the focus on really zero greenhouse gas emissions and, you know, somewhere in that timeline of 2050 or there. Okay. Again, so this is what I want to do now. I want to kind of summarize some of the things, and then I can talk you through if you have before you can hit the link in terms of that work done by our hired experts about analyzing each one of those scenarios. And so the first consideration is that's laid out in that presentation is the number of schools we would have to temporarily close as we either renovate or build new. That's one of the standards we want to take a look at, looking at the scenarios. The year though that would happen, the temporary closing of those facilities. And then the options that we have for our students when we have to temporarily close, whether that be going to some schools that are what I believe are under capacity, or purchasing module portable classrooms and finding a location for those classrooms, along with transportation costs and assigning new attendance areas for folks when they need to go to a different school. And then obviously the cost and the timelines of that, both not only the temporary movement of students, but also the cost and timeline to renovate the schools, what we're capable as staff and what the private sector can provide for us in terms of the actual work on the facilities. Okay, so the first one, 2040, I'm gonna print it out, paper, great, not paper. I printed out the 2040, the February goal to talk about scenario 1. And this is why I say for us to implement the current resolution is extremely difficult. And I say that in the sense that in order to do that, we would have to close 9 schools in 2026, 9 schools again the following year, and 10 for each of the successive years after that, right? Which is put it mildly, a very large lift for us to be able to implement in terms of that scenario. And so along with that work, they've laid out the cost of implementing that, which would be obviously, if we're going to go that way, would inform us in terms of meeting that closure and that renovation schedule. at the cost of $765 million we need available in 2024, 300 million by 2028, an additional 35 million in 2032, and 20 million more after 2036. But even if we could do that, I'm saying we can't implement that feasibly, right? I mean, we do not have the capacity to shut down that many schools, really in any time, whether it's timeline 5 years out or 10 years out. It would be a huge undertaking, for us to be able to do. So any questions about that, or I plan on doing kind of the same thing scenarios?
Carrie. I don't have a question about that.
Okay.
Board
So
Member
that-
Muldrow?
Yeah, I guess I want to ask, as we're kind of facing climate change and global warming, is there a point in which we would look at kind of the mass extinction of an animal species or plant species and go, hey, we wish we would have done this work faster and more aggressively?
I think that answer is yes, to me personally, but
I guess in part, I asked that question because I think of this work as, I think we all want to think of this work as preventative to catastrophe. However, we're in a space of global catastrophe right now. And so I would hate to think that we pump the brakes on this work, we do this work less aggressively, and then after the consequences of global warming, you know, impact us in a more direct way, we sit back and go, man, I wish we could use the time we had more thoughtfully and more aggressively in addressing this. This is the 9th month that the world has shattered heat records. So it's the 9th consecutive month in a row. I'm curious about how experts on climate change are being brought to the table to help us weigh the consequences of delaying this work or the scale and rate at which we should do this work.
Just jump in and add, I see Board Member Vandermeulen in the queue, but at least as it relates to our specific district, I don't think it's the responsibility to combat climate change is not the sole responsibility of one individual school district.
I agree.
And so we should pursue this within reason of our means, and acknowledge that this is a big responsibility that's in part larger than us. Board Member Vandermeulen?
Yes, I have a question on the closing of the temporary closing of the schools. How will this cause a problem with following individual education plans or placements for students with disabilities who may not be able to get a wheelchair into a temporary classroom?
Nikki, I think we would have to, if that indeed were the case, if we were using temporary classrooms, we would need to be sure that there were accessibility options in place for all of our students with IEPs. We would not want to be moving into a space that students could not access. So thank you for lifting that. That would be a priority if indeed we had to displace students because a building was being renovated or even torn down.
Also have one other question that's tangentially related, and
Sure.
that would be, I know currently Black Hawk is not handicap accessible restrooms. Could someone find me the cost of that so I can research grants on that issue?
Yep, Nikki, we can get you some information on that. I
Beautiful.
think Building Services is also working on that. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Lisa. That's it for me.
Board Member Pearson?
Yeah, thank you. I just had a question about the school closures. So if we're doing like 9 schools the first year and then 9 schools next year, like how long are we anticipating on average the schools to take to kind of renovate and get up to date? Are we thinking like 2 years? Are we thinking like 3 years, 1 year? I guess that's kind of just where I'm looking at, because then I'm thinking of like even if we were to do the more aggressive approach, if we're closing 9 schools and then and it takes about 3 years for it to get done, And then we're gonna have to close another 9 schools. I feel like at some point we'll have more schools closed than for renovation than actual spaces that are open. So that's why I'm asking.
Those are very good questions and I'll answer it this way. I think it's very difficult for us to do that number of schools in terms of closing. I think depending on the individual site, whether it's build, new or renovate, I think it's safe to say without having done a lot of detailed work of the specific sites to implement the sustainability plan, I think you have to plan for 2 years for a school to be offline as we either renovate or build new, in space next to it. But that's part of my reluctance to say we can do this by 2040. I'm not saying it's impossible, it's just very difficult, and there hasn't been a lot of detailed analysis done to really implement this. I just know in terms of what we've been able to do the last 4 years with 317 million. And the time and the price tag is just, it's quite honestly, I think overwhelming to be able to implement that 2040 renewable goal. That's just where we are today.
When we've had to change school locations due to a building problem, like when Chavez opened up, the logistics to move one school to another school are just unbelievable, complex, and so many factors. So it just reiterates the careful planning that's required when you have to close a facility. Even, we've closed schools temporarily. It is very challenging. Can be done, but just adding to the complexity of it, and very good planning required.
Okay. And then I think I wanted to kind of hear what Ali had mentioned just about the scientists or those that are working on climate change and how we're kind of utilizing those folks. And I guess I didn't hear an answer to that, but I'm interested in knowing about how they are kind of factored into this. I know that, for example, one building that, and this has nothing to do with schools, but one building that was supposed to have a certain type of commercial space in our community was built, but it didn't necessarily include experts on how to craft that space to make sure that it could be utilized. And so unfortunately, that space then is not being used for what it was meant to. So I just say that just to ask, how are we using our scientists to make sure that we can do this really well and do this effectively and as expeditiously as possible?
Yeah, I can't comment on scientists in terms of the research on climate change, but I do know, obviously, the architects that were using and design engineers, they're skilled in architectural designs to meet the goals. It's a matter of us being able to manage, pay for in a short time frame the number of facilities we're talking about under scenario 1, right? So once the path is confirmed and we've done the facility condition report, it lays out a cost for each one of our facilities to renovate to include the sustainability goals. That's that $1 billion price tag we've been talking about. So now it's a matter of figuring out the resources and time to implement that. And it's hard for me to fathom how we can accomplish scenario 1, given where we are at today.
Okay. And just my last question is just does anyone know if other school districts around us in the county or kind of in the broader area of Wisconsin are also going through similar things and looking to kind of bolster their schools? I know some of the other places around they have newer schools in some ways, but some do have really old schools as well. So just wondering if we're kind of engaging with other schools as well around this.
I have not, but we definitely can do some research.
Sivan, I could speak to that. At the WASB conference, Maya, I went to a session that was led by Middleton Cross Plains. they're doing this exact same process right now.
Okay, thank you. I asked that just because then we can also look to our partners in this work, so.
Maya,
Thanks.
I would say also you'll see something in the equity projects about a team that would work around sustainability, a sustainability manager and a team that could do some of the work that you're proposing, networking with other folks who are trying some things and learning from that. So I just wanted to provide that hook for later on in the presentation.
That's it for me, Sabian.
Board Member Mosner Felcom.
Thank you. I feel a little bit confused because we're talking about scenario one, but there were 4, right? Like, and the second one is also meets the 2040 deadline, but closes 3 schools a year over a longer period of time. So I'm just a little bit confused about where we are in the, like, did we cut you off, Bob? Is that what happened? That you were like gonna talk through the other 3? Or is there a reason that we're talking about scenario one so much?
It's totally open. It's a conversation, a discussion. We can talk about scenario 1 and move on to scenario 2. Scenario 2 is 2040, but it's 0 greenhouse gas emissions, which
Right, right.
is a significant different implementation.
But you said it was the more widely accepted scientific measure.
Yes,
Right.
absolutely.
So I mean, I'm one person on a board of 7
I'd like to know.
people, but like, I'm like, we should talk about number 2, right? Because number 2 is like not impossible and meets the goals. And the other thing I wanted to throw into the room, it's like, 'cause I'm always talking about this, like, when there are like massive shifts to how a school has to run because it has to be closed or renovated, that seriously impacts the day-to-day running of the school. We've all said that, but that also means that you have an opportunity to say, hey, we have 3 years to think about like, what could be different about these kindergarten through 5th graders 3 years, or these middle schoolers whole middle school life, or whatever, that I don't think we should think of as only a problem. Because I think it could also be an opportunity. That's me. Thanks.
Board Member Richmond.
Speaking as a student and in consideration of the hundreds of students that have repeatedly asked for the MMSD to prioritize sustainability, I want to reinforce how important it is that our current energy goals are maintained, not pushed back. This continued discussion of pushing back the energy goals is not productive in the context of the climate crisis that has increasingly significant impacts related to equity, health, and education on students like myself and students of the future. A second quick comment, the Madison goals that were previously mentioned in the presentation are a misleading comparison here because those goals are for the community as a whole, which is a broader undertaking and less directly controlled than schools within a district, because we are now discussing district operations and not the overall community in general. A better comparison, I think, would be to the City of Madison's goal of 100% renewable energy for city operations by 2030, which is a full decade more ambitious than MMSD's goals. I also want to mention that the UN goal is also a poor comparison because the 2050 is the deadline for the entire world to reach net zero, which means that better resource, better off parts of the world, like Madison, must reach net zero far before then. So it's really truly our responsibility. Just kind of in summary, delaying the goals until 2050 would be unacceptable. So for the sake of students, current students and future students, the administration and the board must maintain the current goals. And that's my statement, but I'd also like to ask a quick question related to funding, because a frequently discussed obstacle is funding. I haven't heard much discussion of the MMSD taking advantage of the Inflation Reduction Act, which makes geothermal energy systems cheaper to install than natural gas systems. And I know HVAC system electrification would be a pretty crucial aspect of the referendum. So is this currently a part of the plan, and how can the MMSD ensure they're leveraging this great resource?
I'll address the last point, Talia, first. Yes, it is an option to offset our costs in terms of the grant programs that are available. We just submitted the application to get refund of some of the expenditures for the LED Titan Light project. Those those programs require us to spend the money up front and then submit application for reimbursements. We'll definitely take advantage of any grant programs or reimbursement of expenditures as it happens. That we just have to do it first and then apply, and we're definitely gonna be doing that. And we've looked into it, worked with a couple of different groups, but our first application is in. So we're hopeful that, that'll be successful, but that will definitely offset costs in the end, but we have to pay for and fund the costs first and then seek reimbursement.
Remember something?
So I was gonna have a similar question. A little bit more specifics. Do we have a calculation for a timeline that maximizes the tax credits that are out there now?
Lisa, no, not a specific. We're aware of them. We've looked back at the expenditures we've incurred the last 2 years to see what we could recoup from 2023. We haven't done a lot of eligible projects for that, but we're in the process of submitting an application for that. Clearly, that's part of the more detailed planning. When we get a plan of what we're going to look for in terms of additional funding for facilities, that clearly will be part of the plan. But we don't have a detailed plan right now.
So I'm trying to think about how we weave that into our calculations around the timeline that we want to pursue. The numbers that we're talking about, the amount of investment in our schools is really significant. And so obviously we want to maximize those opportunities. So I don't want to unintentionally make a decision that leads to taking us outside of that window of receiving those tax credits, that reimbursement. And so it feels important to understand that. And then the other piece is, I don't really understand how much money we're talking about when it comes to the Inflation Reduction Tax Credit. Do you have an idea of how much money we could be receiving back from, this larger investment that we're making?
I don't right now, but I made a note and I can work with staff and take a look at the projects and see what projects are eligible and what the reimbursement is and what's the timeline to seek reimbursement, and we can get information back on that.
All right. I can move forward.
Yeah, scenario 2.
Yep.
So scenario 2 is maintaining the 2040 timeline, but puts aside the renewable energy and really focuses on the zero greenhouse gas emissions. That plan would still be the same goals: 50% greenhouse gas by 2030, 75% by 2035. In addition to the renovation of the buildings, it would require us to purchase the credits that were discussed in terms of meeting the goal, because we can't accomplish the work quick enough is the plan right now. And then also doing some more solar panel installation. So that would have to continue to be our conversation as we look at the school sites. And so in addition to geothermal, as we've talked about, we'd have to be mapping out and costing out the actual installation of the solar panels. And then purchasing from the utilities those credits back to keep us on track. In terms of the cost, it becomes considerable, right? In terms of accomplishing. It still requires 3 schools to be closed beginning in 2026, followed by 3 additional in 27 and 3 additional after that, and then stays on this pattern of shutting down 3 schools a year until we accomplish our goals, which has the same cost that we talked about in terms of identifying alternative locations as we move students out and complete that work. Scenario 2 requires $275 million in 2024, followed by $310 million in 2028, $350 million in 2032, and $180 million in 2036. I want to add, which is applicable to scenario one and all the scenarios. Part of this conversation, which we do not have, because you need additional resources to plan and really know which are gonna be, are gonna be worked on, renovated, or built new in that time frame. Is these costs are contingent on a decision made at some point in time by the board, involvement in the public, I would guess, of whether we're gonna renovate or build new in each one of these school sites, right? Much like that same conversation was for East and West and La Follette and Memorial, when we renovated the comprehensive high schools instead of building new. Those same conversations have to happen. And if we would build new, we would adopt current academic standards, which is a considerably higher price tag than renovating the existing facilities, right? Because might not be a surprise, but it really requires considerable additional square footage in the school buildings to meet today's academic standards than what existed 50 and 60 years ago when the schools were built. So you're really expanding the footprint, which costs more money, right? So these costs are based on renovating every one of those sites, which no decision has been made. Is that a smart investment? Is that what we're gonna do when we get into this? So these costs are estimates, all outlined in our facility condition report that we put out last fall. But I wanna add that caveat. We need to staff up and really develop a master facility plan, which we don't have today, right? We're working on this 3-year long-range facility plan. We're gonna get updated enrollment projections this summer. Those are critical pieces for us to be able to do some, what I call serious, master facility plan, which we, but we're on the path to get it. All right, so that's going back to, comments made earlier about maintaining the 2040. Again, I think it's ambitious, but it is 2040 and it's 2024 now. But know there's a price tag, and know that we're still talking about shutting down 3 schools and all the issues that come with that. Which is not an easy lift by any stretch of the imagination. But that's scenario 2. Any questions on scenario 2? Okay, scenario 3 and scenario 3A and 3B both talk about greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. I'll tell you what I don't like about scenario 3A and 3B. Scenario 3A says, because of all these other things in the market, we really don't have to address our facilities until starting in 2033, which is not at all feasible for our purposes, right? We have a facility condition report that says we need work on our middle schools, and we have some high priority elementary schools, right? So I would say, talking about zero greenhouse gas emissions on 2050 and the analysis that was done here, I would like to go back and kind of modify and work with the experts on costing this plan out better. There's no scenario that says we don't address our facilities as soon as we can, right? It's just a matter of, will we get approval to do this at referendum? And we need to address the middle schools now. Under no scenario do we wait until 2030. But it does give you an idea of, because of zero greenhouse gas emissions, and again, 3A was that scenario that kept us at a constant rate of emissions going through 2050. One of the benefits of 2050 zero greenhouse gas emissions is we don't have to purchase any RECs, and we wouldn't be installing solar panels ourselves, right? Because by 2050, the utilities are going to be there already, right? So when we electrify our grid, we use geothermal, they will have done the solar panels, the other issues in terms of power on the grid, right? So we wouldn't have to be purchasing. And then 3B is just kind of that scenario, but starting again, in 2026, but 2 school buildings at a time in terms of closing and moving forward to hit that 2050 timeline. And it delays the costs, a smaller cost being in 2024 to be 200 in 2024, 200 in 2028, 215 in 2032, 230 in 2036, and then 210 in 2040 and followed by 70 million in 2044, right? So you're just pushing out the cost, being able to plan a little bit better. But you're still beginning, work on, that 2050 timeline. So, that's that. If we want to talk about more about where the board is leaning, again, don't really need any decisions tonight, but we're gonna want some clear indications whether you want to consider changing your resolution that exists today. And that timeline, I believe, puts us at the April Board of Education meeting in terms of modifying that resolution to still be on pace with our long-range plan, to still be able to inform the facility questions that we're ready.
Board Member Nichols?
Thank you. So for scenario 3A and 3B, one talks about a constant rate of emissions reduction, and the other talks about a constant rate of renovations, unless that was a typo, but
No,
can you describe those again? Because you may have done that last month, but I don't know that I caught what the distinction is.
sure.
Yeah.
And so I really don't think, let me answer it this way. I don't think it pays to spend a lot of time on 3A, only because 3A, in my mind, it assumes that our facilities are just fine and they can wait until 2033 to attend to, which they cannot. Right, so I think, and what that means is it's meeting the goals of zero greenhouse gas emissions, because really the marketplace is taking care of that. And we wouldn't have to start investing in our facilities until 2030, until 2033, right? Which I think is really not, I mean, it was one of the scenarios that crossed it out. I really think the focus is on 3B, and that is you do 2 buildings a year, starting in 2024 until 2050. And you're renovating those facilities, but you're doing 2 buildings, really 2 buildings a year. So the constant rate of renovations is 2 buildings.
Got it.
Which to me is, we need to work on our buildings ASAP. As soon as we can get a referendum passed, whether it's 4-year or 20-year, whatever that amount is, we need to start. They are past due, and our facility condition report makes that very clear, and it's laid out very clearly that we need to attend to our facilities. Starting, I believe, with middle schools, which is what the board talked about back in 2020, right?
Yeah.
But that's the difference.
Okay, thank you for that.
I should have just scratched out 3A, then someone. would
No,
say,
that's okay. It's
"I
good,
didn't
it's
talk
good to
about
have it. in
3B.
there.
What happened to 3 or 3A?
Yeah, well, I think I said this last month, and I'll just state it again. That for me, option 1, which is our original resolution language, I don't think is practical at this point. I would like to see us at least move to the greenhouse gas emissions as the metric. So here's the thing, when I look at scenario 2, which would keep us on the zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2040. It means that in the 2024 referendum, if I'm reading this correctly, we're saying $275 million of any facility work would be prioritized around our sustainability and renewable energy. In the 2024 referendum, 275. No, that does not include any other building or facilities work that we may have wanted to envision, correct?
Correct.
Or could there be some overlap? Because some of the schools that are listed in scenario 2 do include some middle schools, right?
Yes. Yeah, design engineers and PRA, they took our direction by us saying, back in 2020, we talked about next up is the middle schools, right? The middle schools are the most need of work. So they costed out these scenarios with the understanding that our facility condition report and our conversations that we knew at the time, we had to start somewhere, start with middle schools, then go to priority elementary schools. I would say I don't like the cost of scenario 2 in terms of that 275, only because I would like us to stack up some buildings, and if we go the 4-year route, like right now, we don't have any money, we don't have any plans of what buildings come next, so that really delays the building season. So we're finishing up our projects in 2024. We should be ready, as they say, shovel in the ground summer 25 to keep on the facility improvement, but we're gonna have to put a pause on it because we don't have any buildings that were approved in the queue to continue to work on. So I would like us, as we talk about the referendum for facilities, to address that issue, to identify more than we can actually renovate or build new in this 4-year period, to be ready the in-between time that we can continue to work on and plan out until we get another approval.
Okay,
So
So-
up that.
so can I just ask, in this community input session that went, I'm sorry, the survey that went out, and will close later today. You mentioned that there was a question out to the community about would they support us coming back every 4 years or looking at a longer term vision around our facilities, right?
Yes.
And did we also include anything around the community's kind of beliefs and desires to see MMSD addressing our renewable energy commitment?
Yes, we did. We talked about it. And we talked about it in the sense that, we mentioned the Board of Resolution exists, and we talked about that $1 billion facility investment includes implementing, making our buildings sustainable.
Okay.
In terms of the investments necessary, because that $1 billion is much more than just redoing the mechanicals and the building envelope, right? It is implementing the sustainability resolution.
Okay.
So we did talk about it.
Okay, so I think what's hard for me, I mean, so I had already stated at the last work group that I was leaning more towards scenario 2, which would require us kind of, I'm one voice, but like rewriting our resolution so that it's focused on zero greenhouse gas emissions, but still maintaining the 2040. I think what's hard for me right now is I also don't know what the community has an appetite for in terms of total investment back into all of our buildings. And so when I see $275 million being one of those components in the 2024 referendum on renewable energy, while I think that's, I mean, the right investment, I just also am trying to hold the fact that we also have some other things that we would like to put in front of the community. So it feels a little hard to answer without knowing how people are responding, right? For me. But I know at some point, you know, as board members, like we have to make those kind of critical calls. I think the other thing that I'm trying to better understand is if there was a scenario in which we were to rewrite the resolution so that it focused more on zero greenhouse gas emissions, but push the timeline out to 250. I don't think I have I understand that the city and MG&E and some of our other you know, local folks are also holding 2050, but it's hard to see like what their timeline is to like get to that and what their kind of rate of conversion looks like. So I mean, yes, I would agree that we shouldn't be waiting until 2033 to start anything, just even if the goal were out. So is there any way that the plan folks can, is there some additional information that would give us a better idea of like what a slightly longer timeline would be based on what the city and MG&E are doing? Or
Yeah, I mean, I can reach out to the city and ask that question. And what their goal is, what their implementation schedule and what their costs are, what they're looking in square foot. I really don't know, the city's infrastructure. I don't know how many buildings they own and what's their square footage. I don't know. But Jen, when are we gonna get the results back from our survey group? The survey closes tomorrow.
This is tonight. We're estimating to get the data back analyzed around the 22nd. Would be the first available date. And we'll also have feedback. In addition, we'll have a bunch of feedback. So it'll be the qualitative and the quantitative components of that. So we'll get quotes and things like that right there.
Which is a good point, which I forgot to mention this earlier. Our building services staff have been reaching out to student groups from each one of the high schools, trying to schedule some meetings for us to continue to talk about the timeline, no matter what the resolution is, right? To bring them to the students to the table and other folks that have been interested in sustainability. They're working on getting that done as first week, I think it's next week, this week. Anyways, I wanted to share that with the board, so you're aware of that.
I think we knew, we had talked about this, I want to say maybe the last operational work group, that the board might need time to dig into this as part of the long range facilities plan, more of a special meeting. We had talked about, so I think that's a conversation that we too, if we want to stay on this timeline of April.
Yeah.
So more on that to come, but that would give the board, I don't know if we want to bring design engineers back or be able to ask some other specific questions, but that was sort of the thinking, right? Is that we could dig into that a little deeper if we had a special meeting on the books. So we could revisit whenever that might be helpful.
Thank you. Board member Vandermeulen, then I'll put myself in the queue. Thank you.
And I think Talia has her hand up as well. But what I was going to say is I am for option 2. 1, we can't wait till 2050. It's not possible. We don't breathe carbon fumes. It's not going to work. And I get that. I understand what I'm asking the community to do. I also am going to put this with some humility and in my own brain, which is in order for individuals with disabilities to be able to use a bathroom in Blackhawk that is accessible, I need a referendum to pass with this best environmental as possible, because these people are going to be the most fragile. The individuals are Black, Brown, Indigenous, disabled individuals have the worst outcomes with climate change. The data shows that. But plain and simple, what we need to do is not change the timeline, but change the number of schools. I think that the 3 is doable. I don't think 10 is doable. I could see 5, I could see 3 as well, but I can't see 10.
Right.
But to be honest, I think that's the best way about it. We've heard from the community. We're hearing from the community, although I do worry about some of the accuracy of some of the surveys because we keep having the same people fill them out. And I don't know if we are getting every community when the same people are filling out the survey every time. But that's neither here nor there. So my option would be 2. Thank you. And I appreciate the work on this.
Board member Richmond, then board member Simpkin.
I'd like to ask, would it be feasible to do partial school closures, like what has been done for current school renovations, and then work on the buildings as a whole during the summer? So there wouldn't be as significant student displacement.
We talked about that option and based on working with our vendors and current building services staff, they really believed it would be very difficult to do partial renovation with elementary and middle school students. And like we did, right? That was their initial response back. Now, saying that, it was conversations and we didn't do much more research into it than that. So that's a question that I'll jot down and we can continue to work out that question. But that was the initial response. Don't do it.
Board Member Simkin, or I'm sorry, is there any more questions that you have, Board Member Richmond? Okay, Board Member Simkin.
Okay. So Bob, you gave us kind of a teaser at the beginning that said that you were gonna have not necessarily a really solid recommendation, but you're leaning towards one of these options. Are you ready to talk about it?
Sure, and for me, it's just looking at what I think is doable, looking at the experiences I've had the 4 years I've done, from the 317 million approved at 2020, and I'll say, when I look back and said, how in the world did we think we could implement the current Board of Education resolution by energy by 2040? And I think the belief at the time was, well, if we do this, the vendors nationwide will come and supply us the services that we don't get regionally, right? I don't know how true that is, right? Matter of fact, I don't think that's true. I don't think we're gonna get construction companies from across the globe to come and help us get 9 or 10 buildings closed a year and renovate them and have them up and running every 2 years and take care of them all to hit the 2040 on renewable energy. I don't think it's possible, right? I do think, so to me, I think zero greenhouse gas emissions must be the metric. We must change that resolution. And whether it's 2040 or 2045 or 2050, I think the biggest question that I've already jotted down is we need to spend a little bit more time looking at what does it mean to close 3 school buildings, particularly the 3 that are identified here, right? What is the cost of portable classrooms? Where can we move the middle school students while this is happening? Is it 1 year or is it 2 year? And what is the cost associated with it, right? We haven't done that, but I think that's a huge piece to inform. So I think it's doable. I think right now with what I know, I just have reservations that we can honestly pull off the 2040 timeline. And so for me, not that it can't be done, I'm not saying next week. One, we don't have really good in-depth analysis and research. It hasn't been done. Once it gets done, then you get a little bit better on, can we do this or not? So to me, it's zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. And I understand if you have a resolution that says 2040 today, and that's 10 years later, we get that. But I think what's doable and achievable and maybe even being done by 2050 is zero greenhouse gas. But, that's what I think. Sure.
I'm finding it hard to. I also feel like this is really critical. I don't know there's anyone in the room that doesn't feel that this is incredibly critical, timely work that needs to happen. And just recognizing that, as a board, the 7 of us can vote any way we want to, but our community has to be on board with us in order for this to happen. And so I'm really interested in seeing
number 5.
what the feedback we're getting from the outreach so far has been, because to me, that's going to inform the decision that I make. I'm going to do something, I want to make a decision to move forward no matter what, but to move forward in a way that our community is 100% behind, because that's the only way we can do this. So waiting for that, all that data to be analyzed. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I think the community having sufficient input and being aware of what it will take is really important. Just a few thoughts. One of the first things that I thought of is I would like to see this resolution be flexible, and I guess the word for me tonight is living document, because I think that it's very possible that a board 5 years from now will have a different reality than we will have right now. The costs of some of these technologies might decrease, a new technology might emerge, the federal grant programs that were discussed earlier tonight might be more aggressive, that let us pursue this goal more aggressively, and I'm also thinking about our budget environment and that we have to balance competing priorities and competing needs and considering seriously the potential disruption of learning is serious, and also just weighing budget investments. That's gonna be the big theme for the next conversation and for the next few months is how we balance these priorities and our operating budget. So I would like this resolution to be flexible for boards in the future to also amend should things change. And yeah, so right now I am leaning B. But if we have a community that's on board to pursue this aggressively, I would be sympathetic to that too, so. Board member Vandermeulen, did you have any other comments or thoughts? All good, okay. Everyone good? Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, our public speakers here, so I don't know if you wanna
Yes.
have Carrie come speak.
Let's do this.
Apologies, she's been here for an hour and a half, she just in one spot. Great, thank you. Good evening, most of you I'm familiar with, but I'll be very brief. Thank you for making time for us. I'm just here in support of community schools as one of the equity strategies being discussed today. So my name is Carrie Modavilov. I'm a retired teacher from Madison. Taught 32 proud years in this district. I'm the past president of the Madison Teachers Incorporated Teachers Union. I am a current sitting member of the Madison Public School Foundation's board. And I am here acting as MMSD's national coach for National Education Association as a community school improvement coach. So I'm here to talk about, as you hear and examine the priorities among the many targeted equitable improvement programs, I just want to share some compelling and really sustained national evidence in the community school model. And it not only shows opportunities for improvement, but actually true transformation, which is really what we're seeking. So just want to quote some research that started back in 2016, 17, and then has been reaffirmed by the Brookings Institute in 2023, that LPI's community school as an effective school improvement strategy. A review and evidence asserts as states and districts and schools consider improvement strategies, they can be confident that the best available evidence demonstrates that the various community schools approaches offer a promising foundation for progress. Further, the National Equity Policy Center's research reads, we conclude from our review of research that the evidence base about well-implemented community schools and their component parts provide a strong warrant about their potential contribution to school improvement. There is sufficient evidence that meets ESSA's criteria for evidence-based approaches to include community schools as part of a targeted and comprehensive intervention to support the transformation in high poverty schools. Again, as I said, Brookings Institute with the Community School Forward Task Force reaffirmed last year that the science of learning and development shows that all children, regardless of race, ethnicity, zip code, or circumstances, thrive in the whole child environment where their physical, cognitive, academic, and social, emotional, and developmental needs are met. There is an increasing recognition of how a community school strategy might provide the blueprint for how schools and communities create learning environments in which children thrive. Several studies also find that community schools are a cost-effective strategy, yielding positive social and economic returns. Simply put, community schools led by the full service community school coordinator strategically work to create the conditions necessary for students, staff, families, and communities to thrive. Not the 1,500 hours their students are with us in the school day, in the school building. Rather, in addition, it analyzes and addresses the conditions present in the lives of our students and families in the 4,500 waking hours outside of our school building. It looks to do this with our community, not to our community, and not for our community. For decades, MMSD's commitment to providing equitable opportunities, striving towards achieving equitable outcomes, has centered on teaching and learning, as well as social, emotional, and relational improvement strategies. The community school strategy is designed to exponentially increase this impact through deep examination of current as well as desired landscape of which these improvement goals will be centered. It looks at both qualitative and quantitative, reaching the super majority of interest holders. In the community schools that I coached this year, they have met on average 83 to 93% engagement with families, with community partners, with students and staff. It's an outstanding statement to make, and we're seeing them meet that engagement goal over and over in this authentic engagement strategy. A key component to the success of this model is the sustained funding of the full-time community school coordinator. Research coming out of New Mexico, the ABC Community School Partnership, found the community school strategy has been proven effective in improving academic outcomes for students, and it is well accepted among the community school practitioners that the crucial piece of the strategy is the funding of the coordinator. The coordinator is the person who oversees the implementation of the strategy and shares responsibility for the outcomes. The return of investment in this study in funding the community school coordinator has shown that for every $1 put into staffing for a community school coordinator, the return of investment is $7. That's a 700% return of investment of in-kind additional support and partnerships aligned to our existing equity strategies in the schools. By centering these school improvement targets and by building systems and relationships that ask and answer, what are the necessary conditions, existing barriers, as well as untapped talents and assets that exist in our community that could work in service of our goals. Community schools seek to mitigate barriers and innovate in new partnerships and systems that would create these conditions, addressing root cause, further upstream of our challenges and needs that we see in our classroom, and work with schools to create schools free of these barriers and plentiful in the necessary conditions for learning. As an educator, this was the model I yearned for, to partner with my families and co-create the schools that our staff and students and families and community dream of and deserve. I strongly support the full and sustainable funding of the community school model with the prioritization of funding the community school coordinator positions. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to item 6.1, budget development and equity projects.
All right. The exciting part. Okay, so just want to do a little bit of recap on the timeline in terms of our budget timeline. We are gonna unfortunately not have final numbers on healthcare. I do think the budget we've been talking about the last couple of Operation Work Group meetings in terms of $15 million to put aside for to cover additional costs on healthcare is going to be within the right ballpark, right zip code. Different ways of saying it, but close to what we're going to need. Maybe a little bit less than 15 million, but real close. Hopefully, we'll have the final number next week or so and be able to have one more piece of known data as we look at the budget for 24. And then we're going to get into the equity projects. And so that's all for pushing towards, as we've talked about, getting some feedback in April and then making some final decisions for the preliminary budget. And then for final adoption of that preliminary budget at the June board meeting. Okay, so for our budget development, we want to continue to talk about state imposed revenue limits. Want to continue to remind us the external forces are going to continue to try to have us talk about the narrative to talk about we're spending too much from year to year, right? It's important for us to talk about how we're using the resources that are provided by the taxpayers. Want to be smart and invest in our schools in terms of the cost side. But the real story, the story that the Republican legislature does not want us to talk about is their creation of a school finance system that does not provide sufficient revenue on an ongoing annual basis to even meet minimal costs of inflationary increase, right? That is the real story. I think the voters and the board understand that. Talked about it in 2020 when we talked about the need to exceed state imposed revenue limits. So I want us to talk about the lack of ongoing revenues, and I want us to be focused on using our resources wisely. But the real story is the legislature has created a system that underfunds public education on the revenue side. And then we're gonna focus on equity projects and then talk a little bit about strategic budget realignment, which is really taking a look at this year's costs. What are we gonna move forward in terms of some decisions that have been made? We want to get your buy-in, make sure we're on the same track, because it will impact our 24-25 budget. But before we get into that, which is consistent with what we've seen, consistent with what Carrie just shared with us in terms of our budget guiding principles, I just want to spend a little time and read this slide because I think it sets the framework for the equity projects and really what we've been trying to do. Lisa mentioned in terms of our workbook, Lisa mentioned in terms of your direction to us to maintain staffing today, not pull back, give some stability to school leaders. Our directive to maintain our existing healthcare system, knowing that we would be seeing some increases that were fairly substantial that we've seen over the last few years, but that we wanted to maintain for stability's sake where we're at moving forward to better plan further in 25, 26. But the first one is our guiding principle of allocating our resources in line with our core values, aimed at our greatest impact on our strategic framework goals, with really that primary focus on early literacy. There's many cases of that happening through our workbook process and when we talk about our equity projects tonight. We want to continue to maintain, as you have, a multi-year long-range perspective, not only on revenue sources, but making strategic investments like community schools that was begun in our proposal to continue that into 24-25, learn from what we have done, and the successes that we believe that will continue to show dividends for that investments. Always looking at trying to improve our academic outcomes and really be closing these opportunity gaps that we're dealing with. And of course, our school facilities continue to do that. We want to maximize our operational efficiencies and we want to use the taxpayer approved revenue authority to ensure our stability in our schools. Absolutely point on. That's what we have been doing and are proposing we continue to do. And then continue to invest on those practices that show data and where we are making movements, like 4-year-old kindergarten going to full day, continuing to expand early literacy, our teachers, and investment in which I think the board has demonstrated a solid commitment. All right, just a little recap on revenues because revenues are complicated in the state of Wisconsin. Jesse, I'm skipping over the budget goals and moving on to graphs, which I love the most, colorful graphs. But actually, I like black and white spreadsheets. But my colleagues at Madison tell me I should get into color, so I like color graphs too. But what I want you to take away from this is the little green line in the years prior to the 24-25 projection where you see no green is what the voters have approved to increase our ongoing sustainable revenues above what state law allows. That green spot builds on the blue the following year, and you can see we're projecting no new green because the referendum that was approved in 2020 expires after this year. So on current law, what this slide doesn't say, but I know it's true, if I would just estimate our FTE to be the same this year going into next year, that would provide for us a revenue increase of about 1.74%. We know CPI is going to be just over 1%. The difference between what state law would give us on revenue at 1.74% and what a 4% increase would be is about $9 million, right? So I already know we're going into 24-25 with $9 million loss in revenues compared to maintain inflationary costs. That's in addition to the next slide, Jesse, what we've been talking and I've been sharing you about this year's difference between 8% approved by the Republican legislature is a $21 million differential in revenues, right? That is revenues, sustainable, inflationary cost increases to what we have been provided in revenue limits. This $21 million gap already includes the $10 million the voters gave to us in additional revenues for 20. So we're looking at a 2-year gap of $30 million of ongoing sustainable revenues that we don't have and that we're going to be continuing to talk about and refining as a estimate. This is on top of a second year of a structural deficit. We're budgeting to be into our fund on June 30th, and we'll start getting some better numbers over the next 2 months or so on where we're gonna be at. But we have a structural deficit. We need to tap into our one-time revenues, $12.4 million, to maintain our ongoing expenditures, which is evident with the slides I shared with you before. And then ESSER funding, we've talked about this a lot and we'll continue to talk about it because it's a huge piece. There's a $40 million funding cliff that we're looking at in September of 2024. The board's already committed to moving 110.9 FTE with a $12.4 million cost off of ESSER back on the local, a reflection of the board's decision to move them locally funded positions temporarily onto ESSER, which was allowable and needed in our lack of revenues provided by in the Republican controlled legislature. Unfortunately, they will not want to invest in our public school. So summary is revenue limits a big deal. We're underfunded and under-resourced. We're not able to invest like we should be able to invest. We're going to continue to work at our budget. Our referendum is up this year, so we need to take a look at moving forward. That's the financial picture that we are in, which gives me to a recap of 24-25. We are gonna need to develop 2 budgets. I call it option 1, which is the budget that you believe meets our scholars and families. And option 2, which is a budget that is gonna have to be talked about and agreed to that meets our ongoing revenues. And again, we don't have enough revenues to meet the needs of our families. And so the next slide, Jesse, is a slight update in terms of the budget options. The only difference really from what you saw at the last work group meeting is our equity projects totaling $12.9 million. I used to have $15 million in there when I was just estimating. Right now, our ask that we're going to share most of that tonight is about the equity projects. Community schools is the largest of the groups that we want to talk about tonight. But this really is telling us, depending on the compensation increase and where that is, which is an ongoing negotiations between now and setting a question at referendum in terms of identifying the revenue streams we need to address these issues, gives us a maximum of 59 million in additional new revenues needed on an annual ongoing basis, to down to 27.4 million, which I consider our revenues that we're gonna need even if when we roll forward 23-24, and that is the ESSER positions 12.4, and whatever that health insurance increase ends up being, which is gonna be close to 15, maybe a few million less, but we'll know that number in the next week or 2, hopefully in a week. But anyways, that piece will become clear soon. Okay. Now just a little bit recap. Lisa mentioned this. This is our workbook compared to this year and last year at the point in time where schools were working on, and they are now closed, but it's an increase of 228.7 FTE. That's not entirely all new staff being added. It's a redoing of our system, right? At this point in time, normally what we would have done is backed out our IDEA funded positions in terms of special education assistants and categorical teachers, given that is ongoing funding from the feds and where it's at. So you kind of pull it back and then re-give it once the plan. We took that step out and said, you know what, we know where we are at with our IDEA allocations. We know we have a fund balance. We know we're going to be okay. We're going to keep this in there for stability and purposes. Also, quite honestly, staff retention, right? Someone is working here, we're gonna keep them, we're gonna move forward, they're gonna have a job commitment. They're not gonna have this 30 or 45 day limbo period where I think I'm gonna get a contract, but I might not get a contract. Maybe I should look around, see if I can work something. Right, so I think that's a huge step that Lisa and cabinet, you all agreed to in terms of laying out where we wanna go.
And we also left in all of the unallocated from last year.
Yes.
So we went in, and as you know, there's a process for keeping a pool of unallocated FTE that gets added back based on fluctuations in enrollment. that also stayed. So all of that from last year also stayed in this year's allocation to schools. Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt. Bob.
Nope, that's perfect. That's it. Thank you. It's a nice headway. So part of our new and equity projects for 24-25 is that plus earmarking in 24-25 an additional 20 unallocated positions to have available depending on where our enrollments go come September and our registrations that we'll start seeing in August, right? So it's a continual investment to meet the class size projections by the board, but it's just trying to front end some of these conversations and know that it's there for us to be able to meet the needs of our scholars and families. So this next slide is new. I'm calling it strategic budget realignment because that's what it is. It's strategic budget realignment. And so the top line is what we have invested through our ESSER funds, 40.46, 189 positions, right? I've talked a lot about the 12.4, which is really an update of the 12.1 number that was part of, these were approved budget numbers back in October, right? So we know that 110.9 are going to need more than 12.1, looking forward to 24-25. But to stay consistent with the numbers that were in the approved budget, I use the same numbers that were approved last fall in this year's budget. So when you take that out, it remains in terms of ESSER funded in 23-24, $28.4 million and 78 FTE. That's what we'd have to continue to fund in 24-25 if we wanted to continue those one-time ESSER projects. We're not proposing to do that, but instead we're proposing, which we're going to get into the details next, about $12.9 million, what I call equity projects. That has 139.3 FTE. Now, those are 4 positions that are in the slide before that we've already included in our workbooks for 24-25. Lisa mentioned the unallocated pool. Those are those initiatives we talked with you about better staffing for your kindergarten, the K-1 class size reduction, money that's already in and available to schools, and then set aside that 20 unallocated that we're going to use depending on our enrollments, right? That's part of this $12.9 million and 139.3 FTE. Bottom line, the strategic budget realignment is we would reduce expenditures this year to next at the tune of $15.5 million, but we would be adding 61.26 FTE, right? So we're spending less in terms of compared to what we're spending this year, including ESSER, but we would create additional allocations in terms of addressing some of the issues we talked about in terms of the workbook and what we're going to present to you tonight. Okay. So the equity projects we want to talk about tonight are community schools and village builders, Carletta and her team. Jen's going to talk about our grow your own to associate degree. Cindy and staff are going to talk about 4K staff increases, the K-1 class size reduction I mentioned, mental health services. We have a line in for student services salary compression. We did some adjusting of that already. Need to do some more. I'm sure the board have seen some of these emails. I know I have been seeing lots on this topic. This is to address that concern, which is a very legitimate concern. There's a price tag to that. And then Lisa has mentioned the sustainability and facility staff that we talked about needing to really beef up our building services and needs of all the work we have to do with facilities. So I'm going to give the next slide, which is the summary table of the equity projects that we're going to present tonight. And this is less than that 12.9 only because I've already talked about, we built some of this into the workbook already, but it totals $9.4 million. I'll just say, in terms of the sustainability and facility staff, we're proposing to add 3 managers, a sustainability manager, a construction manager, and a building services manager onto ongoing revenues for building and services, 3 FTE at a cost of $365,000. So saying that, I'm gonna we can answer questions as you go through, but we've got time at the end to talk about all what we're presenting right now. I'm going to hand it over to Carletta and her staff to talk about community schools.
All right. Good evening, everyone. My name is Carletta Stanford, and I am the Assistant Superintendent for School Leadership. And I just want to start off by thanking you for giving us this opportunity tonight to briefly present about community schools. So I am being joined tonight by Chelsea Tubbs, one of the associate superintendents for elementary schools, Sarita Foster, the community schools manager, and Adam, who is the director of EDEI, a small but mighty team that's coming before you today. So we are excited to join you tonight to present community schools as a district equity project proposal. Community schools are not new to MMSD, and as an evidence-based school improvement strategy, the work is directly aligned to the district's strategic framework goals, centering equity, shared decision-making, and the enhancement of educational opportunities for scholars and families. Through this high-level presentation this evening, we will give you a brief overview of community schools, highlight the impact of the implementation of community school strategies across the district, and articulate our commitment to the work moving forward through our plans for scaling for the 24-25 school year. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Sarita, and she's going to get us started with the community schools model.
Thank you for the introduction. Again, I'm Sarita Foster, Community Schools Manager. I've had the privilege of serving in this role since last March and have been working for this district for 5 years now. I would also like to give a shout out to the entire community schools team. The work and what we're presenting to you today would not be possible without their dedication and support. I'm honored to present to you tonight on behalf of our team. What this slide is showing is the community schools transformation model. The community schools transformation model shows a robust community school, which grounds us in the work of the 4 pillars of community schools, addressing the holistic needs of students, families, and the community. It shows that community schools are more than just educational institutions. They function as dynamic ecosystems that integrate a diverse array of resources, programs, and partnerships to create a supportive environment for students, families, and the broader community. What's equally important is creating sustainable resources, a shared governance model, continuous cycles of improvement, data systems that tell our story, creating professional learning opportunities for our staff and community, and strategic partnerships to sustain programming. In these ecosystems, traditional boundaries between education, social services, and community engagement overlap, allowing for a more holistic and integrated approach to addressing the complex needs of individuals and communities. Within this transformation model, schools are able to create optimal whole child conditions for student success so that every child is on track to graduate ready for college, career, and community. Next slide, please. This slide shows an overview of the 6 strategies informing our transformative approach. The community schools comprehensive support services are tailored to meet the diverse needs of students, families, and the community. The community schools approach is not a program in the sense of specific structures and practices that are replicated across multiple contexts. Rather, it is grounded in the principle that all students, families, and the community belong and benefit from strong connections between educators and local resources, supports, and people. We prioritize equity to ensure that fair distribution of resources by lifting the voice and creativity of our community. Through creatively engaging with stakeholders, we conduct ongoing efforts to gather input from various champions of community schools by building support for expansion through active engagement. To grow and expand our staff's capacity building, we have implemented a Grow Your Own initiative to cultivate local talent within our school district. By way of data collection and evaluation, we've established a robust system for ongoing evaluation. Community schools by assessing impact using metrics such as academic performance, attendance, and out-of-school time. We utilize the collected data to inform strategic decision-making and program enhancement. Through innovation and flexibility, we can foster a culture of excellence and continuous improvement by piloting new initiatives to address evolving needs of students and communities while remaining flexible and responsive to emerging challenges and opportunities. As community schools, we continue to focus on offering comprehensive support services tailored to meet the diverse needs of students, families, and the community. These strong connections support learning and healthy development both in and out of school and help young people become more confident in their relations with the larger world. Back to Carletra. Next slide, please.
Thank you, Serena. As most of you know, community schools were started in MMSD in 2016 at Mendota and Leopold Elementary Schools before expanding to Hawthorne and Lakeview in 2018. Although there are several transitions that have happened in the district since the inception of community schools, with transition of superintendents, the community school manager position was actually vacant for 2 years before we were able to hire. The fluctuation of community school supervision, the commitment to the work has not stopped. With one-time ESSER funding, we had the opportunity to expand community schools to Southside, Sandburg, and Orchard Ridge Elementary. In addition, through an innovative and intentional strategy to support ATSI schools as a way to invest in scholars, families, and staff, the Village Builder Project was born. The Village Builder Project allocated key positions in elementary, middle, and high schools to provide proactive strategies to increase engagement, positive relationships, and social-emotional well-being of scholars and families. These positions included the addition of classroom village builders, family liaisons, and student engagement specialists. Through the success of the Village Builder Project positions and community school strategies, we are excited about what will take place in the future. Beginning in the 24-25 school year, we will scale the community schools model by incorporating village builders as a transformative project under the community schools umbrella. We're in the process of planning the first Wisconsin Community Schools Conference in partnership with Sun Prairie and Milwaukee. This conference will bring community schools from across Wisconsin to work and learn together. And lastly, we will add Kennedy Elementary as our next community school site. Though not an ATSI school, Kennedy has been identified as TSI for Black students, is a Title I school, has experienced growing community needs and few neighborhood resources that can be accessed by families, and has seen a significant increase in enrollment, now making it our third largest elementary school in MMSD. Kennedy is poised to benefit from the support and structure of the community schools model. Next slide, please. Understanding the high level of commitment needed to show the success of community schools and village builders, our path to transformation has allowed us the opportunity to recommit, reflect, and reimagine community schools in MMSD. We wanted to be able to show you just a few examples of qualitative data as a result of incorporating community school strategies and the Village Builder Project in our buildings. And with that, you'll hear some on-the-ground examples from Chelsea and also from... Next slide.
Thank you. Good evening. I am Chelsea Tubbs, and I proudly serve as one of the Associate Superintendents of Elementary Schools. My pronouns are she, ea, and na, and I'm honored to serve a distinguished group of schools within my purview. These schools include Emerson, Henderson, Lakeview, Leopold, Lowell, Mendota, Muir, Orchard Ridge, Southside, and Thoreau Elementary Schools. This group of 10 elementary schools are currently designated as ATSI, which stands for Additional Targeted Support and Improvement Schools. It is an honor to contribute to the growth and success of each school within my sphere of responsibility. Thank you for the opportunity to present the advancements made by our incredible staff within our Community Schools Initiative. It is a privilege to share the transformative impact of our collective efforts in fostering positive change within our district, city, and county. As a team, we are grateful to collaborate with our principals, assistant principals, school-based leadership teams, teachers, staff, parents, guardians, central office team, MTI, community partners, volunteers, the Madison Public Schools Foundation, NEA, Wisconsin Coalition for Community Schools, and also the board. Together, we are dedicated to advancing and enriching our Community Schools Initiative, fostering a collective commitment to educational excellence, community engagement, and equity. We are going to embark on an insightful exploration of the transformational trajectory of our schools have undertaken. Our journey is firmly rooted in MMSD's strategic framework, core values, graduate vision, the 4 community school pillars, and the most recent data pertinent to our attendance rates, which is aligned with DPI and our strategic framework, and the sense of belonging as outlined in our strategic framework. This analysis will specifically focus on our 10 elementary schools currently designated as ATSI. This will provide a holistic view of our ongoing commitment to excellence and educational justice. As we embark on this data journey, it's crucial to connect the dots between attendance and our sense of belonging data and our overarching school improvement goals for the current academic year. We acknowledge that the community schools model and staff are a contributing factor to the success that you see on this slide. For all schools and as a district, our strategic focus is achieving a targeted 3% growth across the metrics we measure at the end of the year. This deliberate objective underscores our commitment to continuous enhancement and reflects our dedication to realizing our district vision that every child will graduate from high school ready for college, career, and community. Let's explore how our data aligns with and propels us towards these ambitious yet achievable goals. This data represents a comprehensive year-to-year overview spanning from the academic year 2022 to 2023 to our most recent quarterly review of progress on February 6, 2024. Notably, this date signified the commencement of the 3rd quarter and the onset of the 2nd semester, encapsulating a critical juncture in our ongoing pursuit of educational excellence. As we delve into this timeline, let it serve as a testament to our continuous commitment to progress and the pursuit of positive outcomes. I want to extend my gratitude for the dedication invested in this initiative, which involves the collaborative efforts of our attendance teams. These teams operate under a shared leadership model, wherein principals collaborate with their assistant principal applicable, their coaches, their social workers, community school staff, and school-based leadership teams. Together, we strive to enhance attendance rates, exemplifying the power of collective leadership and fostering a culture of shared responsibility for the betterment of our communities. For all students, a remarkable 2.46% improvement in attendance, which showcases the effectiveness of our integrated approach. For our African American students, an impressive 3.65% increase, which underscores the positive impact on our African American community. For our English language learner students, a commendable 2.35% improvement, demonstrating inclusivity and support for our linguistic diversity. For our multiracial students, a significant 3.77% increase, indicating the success of our tailored interventions for a diverse student population. For our Latinx students, a noteworthy 2.11 enhancement, reflecting the commitment to meeting the needs of our Latinx community. For our students with disabilities, a commendable 2.73% increase, showing the inclusivity and adaptability of our support systems. And for our transition education program students, which is also known as TEP, an outstanding 4.5% increase, highlighting the efficacy of our targeted programs for smooth transitions. We're also excited to share a significant aspect that resonates deeply with our school communities, the sense of belonging. This key metric of our annual Culture and Climate Survey is a powerful indicator of overall well-being and connectedness by our students. It's important to note that this information encapsulates the journey and growth we've witnessed from the spring of 2023 to our most recent full administration window in the fall of 2023. As we navigate these numbers, let's celebrate the strides we've made in fostering an inclusive and nurturing environment for everyone within our school community. For all students, an inspiring 3.7% rise in the sense of belonging, affirming our commitment to creating a nurturing and inclusive environment. And for our African American students, an inspiring 6.6% increase of belonging, emphasizing our dedication to fostering a sense of belonging amongst our population. As we celebrate these successes, we remain committed to continuous improvement and innovation. Additionally, I would be remiss not to mention that at our current junction of our workbook process, all of our principals have advocated to please continue with this model and also maintain these critical roles and staff in their buildings. Again, a heartfelt thank you to our dedicated leaders and staff, especially our community school staff and leaders, and the hard work that they show every day for the success of our students. Again, tremendous appreciation for our valued stakeholders, including parents, guardians, and community partners, whose collaboration strengthens the foundation of our community schools initiative. Thank you to our board, and especially President Nichols, our original implementer of community schools, for your continued support in building a community of empowered learners. Together through community schools, we are transforming education and shaping a brighter future for our district, city, and county. Together as a united community, we will continue to empower every student to thrive and succeed. Thank you, Jesse. Next slide, please. And with that, I will turn it over to my esteemed colleague, Mr. Adam Clausen.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Adam Clausen. I am the Director of Engagement, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. It's an honor and pleasure to be with you all tonight. And so thank you again for the opportunity to share. I'm excited to highlight two stories at this point to illustrate the impact of two of our transformative projects. Ms. Holly Davis, you'll see in this picture, is a veteran MMSD employee. She spent 17 years as an SEA 5 as a teacher at Thoreau Elementary School. She has partnered well with Brenda Hanahara, who also is a retired veteran teacher and returned to MMSD at Thoreau. When she heard about this Village Builder project and the opportunity to serve students in our schools in this capacity, in quasi-retirement. Village Builders are typically assigned to 3 to 4 classrooms to support our social emotional learning, our literacy and math goals, and many of them have focused reading groups with students with inconsistent attendance. They provide relational and instructional continuity for students, especially those with substitutes cycling in and out, and as teachers are out ill or on leave or transfers. And so their presence has provided some continuity and a proven critical support in the minimization of learning loss and setting classroom norms for schools. Last year, Ms. Davis and Ms. Hanahara they partnered to see 25% of first grade class jump 15 to 20 points on their FastBridge assessment. Their EL spelling and decoding assessments saw significant increases, as well as other classroom assignments that Ms. Davis assigns. Many students went from high risk to low risk on the assessment, and 5 to 6 of them went from high risk to college ready. So I think that deserves some snaps, claps, shouts, and smiles at least. So we have seen our Village Builders collaborate really well with reading interventionists and our BRTs, especially as we have seen an influx in immigrant communities joining MMSD. In Ms. Davis's class, they have also prioritized parent meetings approximately every 2 weeks, especially if there is inconsistent attendance with any of the students. Another exciting role that we created in 2022 is the Student Engagement Specialist. The Student Engagement Specialist, or SES, has focused on a mentorship of a caseload of students and family partnership, really intentional family partnership across secondary feeder patterns. Through their group work, one-on-ones, and a high dose of warm demands, our Student Engagement Specialists have really become invaluable resources in our secondary schools. This example, Ms. T on the right side of your screen, is one of her groups. Her caseload of students from last year, of those who were on her caseload last year, who are still at La Follette High School this year, all but 2 of them had 90% attendance or higher, and no one was failing more than 1 class through the first semester. Again, I think worthy of some snaps, claps, shouts, and smiles for the work over at La Follette. Some of these students from her group have become not just members of BSU, but leaders in BSU. Their co-curricular participation has jumped, and they are now performing regularly at La Follette school-wide events with their STEP team, as well as other MMSD and even non-MMSD school events. And yes, other districts have wanted to see MMSD's Black excellence too. Excellence here inspires excellence everywhere. Next slide, please. We have a number of metrics and instrumentalities that we have been monitoring for each of these positions, some of which are articulated on this slide, but just want to mention that we and our school-based staff have been working closely with our associate superintendents, principals, student services teams, and teachers to deeply integrate each of these piloted positions into each school. There are nuances from site to site, but we have really wanted to remain grounded in the foundational work that each position was designed for, which for us re-engages the hearts of students and instills a deep belief in each student's ability to succeed, and partnership with every family is essential for growth. These metrics are not goals, they're outcomes and consequences of the student centrism and collaborative work that our staff have embodied, so that every child, staff, and family are thriving, just as goal number 2 says. And for us, goal number 3, that every student, every child, African-American child, excels in school. Our wraparound services re-empower teachers to do exactly what they do best, and that's inspire and instruct our children. We are excited to launch a number of steering committees this spring, as you'll see on this slide, as we continue our revitalization of community schools, including the participation in co-creation of the inaugural Wisconsin Community Schools Conference this summer. These efforts create the space and framework for family and community voice and partnerships to be front and center again in our schools. So we couldn't be more excited to continue scaling this equity strategy throughout MMSD. Next slide, Jessica. Collaborative leadership is a core pillar of the community school model. Act 20, which the Wisconsin legislature recently passed, focuses on the science of reading statewide, but it does include individualized family engagement strategies for literacy. These positions already have inherent family engagement components to them, so we are excited to have some of this infrastructure in place already to support and comply with this state law. The 2015 Every Student Succeeds Act, signed by then President Obama, lists community schools as an evidence-based strategy for improvement. So our strategic scaling of the community school model and integrating these early intervention and prevention pilots via the Village Builder and Student Engagement Specialists set us on a path for the outcomes that we all desire. These packages that we initially gave schools in 2022 prioritized intervention for ATSI schools and was our prevention strategy for TSI schools so they would not be vulnerable to the ATSI designations. Next slide, Jesse. We are excited to really highlight one metric in the staffing demographics as we scale community schools this past year and a half. This is a testament, the stats you see on this slide. It's a testament to our human resource team, principals, associate superintendents, all teaming to hire the best candidates from and for their school community. We have emphasized the village concept so they could recruit candidates with ties to their school community. And so that I think that that speaks to the growth in equity mindsets that our principals and other staff have made. Of note, all original 55 positions that we created in 2022 have all been filled at some point or another in the last year and a half. So we're really proud of that collaborative effort. MMSD has invested a lot of money and time to help staff grow in relational and culturally responsive methodologies over the years, from empathy interviews to restorative justice, cell work, PBIS, and countless FICE consultations. And so we believe now is the time to build upon that investment in staff in a way that invests in a nearly 70% staff of color workforce in this project, to show that we are a place where equity lives beyond value and mission statements, but in our budget and in our schools. This is an investment in Black excellence. One of the strategic equity investments in this cohort we would like to propose is a Grow Your Own to Associate's Degree program. So my colleague to my right, Dr. Jen Shepke, the mastermind of our Grow Your Own program, is here to present the exciting progress we've made in the development of this program.
All right, mastermind, I don't know, but I'm really excited for this. So this is an intentional strategy that we have created to draw upon the diversity that you just saw on that last slide of our community schools. But all staff are going to be eligible for it. So just to put that in perspective, we have a great portfolio in this district of Grow Your Own programs and tuition reimbursement. So we have ways to develop our staff into educators, into school counselors and psychologists, more recently school leaders. Programs that we have vary significantly in terms of the district sponsorship, ownership, the degree of cooperation and collaboration between our district and higher education institutions, which higher education institutions, the degree or the certification focus, the required service commitment, supports that we give participants, et cetera, et cetera. So, but missing from our portfolio is something aimed at the asset that we have in this district, which are our folks who are working in the support roles, like a village builder, like our community engagement specialists, like our community school resource coordinators, our education assistants, our special ed assistants. So what we are proposing here is a Grow Your Own to Associate degree program. So we want to build on the assets of our employees in this district, develop them into educators. That's going to meet our workforce needs for education and also diversifying our educator workforce, sorry. So the proposal here is that they attend Madison College for 2 years, and they're going to earn their Associate of Arts degree in Liberal Arts Transfer Education pre-major. Okay, so this is one that will transfer then to UW-Madison to become an elementary ed, special ed teacher. We'll get more to that in a minute. They would take coursework at Madison College from May of 24 through August of 26, so that's 2 years. We've built in high touch recruitment strategies. It's going to be a cohort based way to go through the program, which we have found in our Grow Your Own programs really reinforce our participants' successful completion of programs like this. They would be employed in part-time positions, and this is the key part. So village builders, for example, could be a 0.5 FTE, 20 hours a week, okay? We would make them whole, giving them a stipend, and they would be earning basically a full-time wage, pay their tuition, and they attend school. So when they get out after 2 years, they'll have earned their associate degree. We're going to have a service commitment that they would continue to work in their current role that they've been in for 2 more years, with the intent that we will then utilize the already existing UW-Madison School of Education and Madison College transfer agreement that would continue their education on to become an elementary teacher. So big gap that we're filling. I'm super excited about this. Jesse, could you go to the next slide? And because Bob loves charts, we put a chart in here. So there's a couple of distinctions in here. So one thing, we're looking at cohorts, 25 people per cohort per year to go through this program. First cohort, 25 people. We're budgeting that we are going to keep everyone in the program as they go through. We know that may not always be possible, but that's how we're going to budget right now. The first year, fiscal 25, we would start with 1 cohort. That what you're seeing there is the stipend, it's a tutoring support, it is their tuition, some courses that are called builder courses at Madison College, so which might bridge some needs that participants may have before they can get into English 1 or Math 1. So they'll take their coursework for the first 2 years, that's that green box, and then it is our intent to then work with UW-Madison to see if we can then develop the bachelor degree component of this. Okay, right now what we have baked is the associate degree component. The first cohort would leverage the Teacher Pledge, which is a loan forgiveness program at UW-Madison that pays the entire cost of tuition for an in-state equivalent of tuition and fees for the last 2 years of your program. That Teacher Pledge is through the summer of 28. Which means that past cohort 1, it won't be available at this point, okay? We would bring in a new cohort every year, 25 people coming in every year. So if you wanna look at what this program would look like at full capacity, look to year 4, that's fiscal 28. So that represents people who are in the program in years 1 and 2, going to Madison College. And also people in cohorts 3 and 4 going to a higher education institute, which we would hope would be UW-Madison. All right, I'm gonna turn it over to the next slide and back to Bob.
All right, wonder who created this slide. This is just a community school and village builder, slide showing 23-24, the budget and the FTE, but proposing what's been talked about for 24-25. The changeover, both on funding and FTE. So I'm not gonna spend a lot of time on the details, I'll point to the bottom line. The ask for community schools and village builders to maintain going into 24-25 is 4.8 million, 61.5 FTE. And then I want to talk a little bit about how we're proposing to fund that. Lisa mentioned part of the current community schools and village builders is funded the combination of ESSER and our Fund 80 work. We'd use a similar funding split, but in essence be replacing that ESSER dollars with local funds, Fund 10 funds for 24-25. We would still go to Fund 80 for the community school resource coordinators and community school manager, Fund 80, so that'd be about 1.1 million, or a little over 20% of the cost of this proposal would be funded by Fund 80, the rest being covered by our local dollars. And then finally, Lisa also mentioned, which is really important to talk about, is we do have a grant fundraising by the Madison Public Schools Foundation of over $600,000 that can be used to offset some of the costs of that first year. That we would, if we move forward, you approve moving forward, we'd be able to get some money back to offset that startup costs of the first year, 4.8. So that's what that slide's for. And so I turn it back over. The stuff, which is a video.
All right, because you know the presentation could not be complete without a video. So here's a video so that you can hear directly from the voices of our scholars, family, staff, and community stakeholders. Go ahead, Jesse.
I shake my head no, because it's beautiful. It's definitely community. They bring everybody together.
My favorite part of coming to school is feeling welcomed and happy and joy.
We are a team. We are supportive, we are loving, we're caring. So this community here is my family and it is my home.
My daughter loves it. She wakes up with a smile on her face because she has to come to school. That's something new.
We come here during school in summer and we play on the grounds and we check out the vegetables and the gardens and stuff. And I think it's just a wonderful school for my grandchild to go to.
It's amazing. I love the fact that the kids can go to do like after school activities. They have soccer.
They do like the cooking clubs here for the kids and the step team, and they got the basketball. They got the garden club. They just have so many different things that they can do with the kids.
I can help. And then even with the after school activities, like some days I may have to come pick her up early and she'll whine and want to stay. And I had to tell her, like, you do have a home to come to. Even though I know you feel like Mendota Community School is your home, like, you have a home as well that you have to come home to and eat dinner and everything.
I feel happy and excited, and I feel glad that I'm at school because I can learn and have fun.
One thing that I've learned and that I love and I cherish for my school and my community school is that you're never alone.
I go to the pantry, and that's so convenient because sometimes I don't have, because after school she's hungry, but I know they got the pantry here and I can grab something real quick. And I see a lot of kids with diapers, so they help them with that. And it's just getting really hard for me as a grandparent to take care of her. And I'm so appreciative of it, and that's the community part I really like.
Community is fun, cool, and they'll love me.
I love this school. I love the teachers. I love what they bring to the community. I love what they bring to the kids. I love the fact that they listen. They don't single anyone out. They don't, they make everybody feel like family.
A loving family.
And it's that loving family community that extends well into high school.
And Coach O
is like literally my school mom. She supports me in everything. I can always count on her and ask her for help or guidance on literally anything I'm going through.
For me, Coach O has been like a school parent, so she's helped me with problems that I don't really want to talk to anyone else about.
Your grades gone up?
Yeah, like every time I slack on my grades, she always pushes me to do better, and that's why I'm in tutoring now, because she was like, well, if you're struggling with this, you should probably get tutoring, and she's always there to help me.
I can't imagine my daughter's freshman year experience not having him there as a support, even when she doesn't want it. And so I can't really put into words how much he means and how much he's impacted our family. But I know that it's not just my family and my daughter too.
You know, I'm trying to be somebody that I needed when I was their age, because I've had my troubled days and my troubled times, and if I would have had somebody there to tell me what to do and what not to do, it would have made a huge difference. So I'm trying to be a difference.
It makes me feel seen and heard. My voice can be heard. It also gives me a positive outlet for things I might need help with.
I haven't grown up with my mom, and she has really stepped up to help me in school, and she's always pushing me to do my very best.
So if you were to say in 3 words, what does she mean to you?
3 words. Anything and everything. I guess, cause like I said, she's just my role model.
Thank you. So we would just like to reiterate again that this work would not be possible without our partnerships with the Madison Foundation, MTI, NEA, Wisconsin Coalition of Community Schools, United Way, our partner organizations in and outside of Dane County, and of course, our MMSD staff. So we want to thank them for believing in community schools, the impact and possibilities in MMSD, and for not only being a part of the village, but for believing in the vision. So thank you. And that concludes the presentation. Next slide, Jessica.
So this is just the same summary slide that we started out talking with. Equity project summary is kind of a break that's community school and village grow your own. And Cindy, I believe is gonna take over talking a little bit about the rest of the equity projects that you've heard some in the past couple of meetings, but Cindy wants to talk more about, give you a little bit of information on the remaining equity project. So Cindy.
Good evening, Board of Education and everyone else. It's hard. Could you go to the next slide, please, Jesse? Ooh, it's hard to go after the amazing presentation from my colleagues on community schools and village builders. I just want to touch on a few additional equity projects that we are putting forth. A few you are familiar with based on the last few months that we've talked about. One is aligned to our early literacy work, and that is continuing to grow full day 4K. A few weeks ago, you heard from myself and Colleen Watoon in terms of where we are going with full day 4K, expansion at New Nuestro Mundo, continuing to increase allocation for our EAs to be full-time, and also the addition of SEAs. We also have talked about our other strategy directly aligned to our work and focus on early literacy, which is making sure that we are staffing our schools that are identified as AGR in kindergarten and first grade classrooms at a ratio of 15 or 16:1, and at our non-AGR schools at a ratio of 17 to 18:1. You saw Bob mention earlier in terms of the presentation that shows that this was all part of the workbook process that we just completed with our schools a few weeks ago. In addition to that, we are also proposing some targeted allocation to focus on social, emotional, and mental health needs at some of our schools. that social, emotional, and mental health needs relate to additional social workers, for schools that have just recently had housing transitions, have increased the number of students that are identified as TAP, and or students that have come in with other significant needs. We believe the additional social workers will really support schools and be able to provide the services our students need beyond what the current allocation is. In addition to that, we also want to think about increased psychologist allocation. That increased psychologist allocation will support our early literacy strategy when it comes to some of the work necessary for assessing and communicating with families. We also believe that the psychologist allocation needs to be targeted at some of our schools that have an increase of newcomers that have recently joined us here in MMSD. Those newcomers require additional testing and additional supports and needs that we believe additional psychologist allocation will be able to provide. And the last is our work around restorative justice. As we think about some of the projects that were on ESSER, we did a significant investment in trying to grow the work of restorative justice in our system. Some of that exists through local allocation at the high school level with us restorative justice coaches, as well as with our partnerships such as the YWCA. We'd like to continue to provide that central office support to be able to provide our schools with the necessary tools and resources to be able to facilitate restorative practices and restorative justice within those schools. I will pause there. Or Jesse, next slide, please. Okay, I'll pause there. That gives you a highlight of the additional components outside of what Carletcher and her team shared around community schools and village builders. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Board Member Vandermeulen, followed by Board Member Nichols.
Yes, presentation was incredibly interesting, and I thank you for the detail on it. If I have an individual question on, for example, on the workbooks, who would I ask? For example, it's been reported that we're cutting social workers from 3 to 2 at a school of 2,200. Who do you talk to on that, and how does that work? Does that part of the increased mental health restorative coach that Cindy was talking about, is that where we would add it back? I'm not quite sure, and I was a little confused.
Nikki, I think if you have a specific question about a specific school, if you could put that in an email to TJ, he will get the information to answer that.
That's wonderful, because I just was confused. The second question I had, well, it's not a question statement. I adore the village builders. I was originally skeptical of them, I'll openly admit it. And I adore them. My statement is as follows. I hope that we can keep them when we don't, and our teachers when we're not sure on the retention strategy based on things that can't obviously be discussed in open session. And that worries me. And what also worries me is the fact that we can't keep creating new programs where we can't pay for the staff of our current ones. That's all I have to say. Otherwise, I think they're doing a great job. I've been at Lakeview quite a bit this year. I've interacted with them. I think they're doing a great job. I don't like them as reading interventionists, especially because we don't have enough of them. So I'm pretty happy with that. Those are just my concerns. Thank you. That's all for me.
Board Member Nichols and then Board Members.
Thank you. I'm gonna just start kind of with some bigger questions first. So Bob, earlier, I have a few questions, Sabian, their Chair Castro. So earlier tonight, when you kind of gave us the 2 budget options for 24-25 on slide 27, you were saying that equity new projects would be at 12.9. Down a little bit from the 15 million you had originally earmarked.
Yes.
But then when I get to slide 31, the equity project summary. That's showing 9.3. Is that 9.3 of the 12 point something is the FTE cost, the full-time staffing cost, or?
The 12.9 that I have in the budget 1 and budget 2 is reflective of the 9.4 plus the work we've already done on the workbooks in terms of what we've already provided to schools baked into that work.
Okay, thank you. You did say
It
that.
totals the two of that. Two numbers I gave for the 12,851,039.3. That's inclusive of the workbook.
Got it.
We've already done.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you for that clarification. Okay, then, there was, so when you all decided on the equity projects, and I don't know if this might be multiple folks. I was wondering if you could just talk about how you made some critical decisions about things that have been started on ESSER that maybe departments may have wanted, but are no longer coming forward kind of on this more narrow list. And Cindy, I see you head nodding. I am specifically thinking about school-based health centers at the high schools and why those don't show up on this list.
I'm happy to answer that if that is okay. Lisa, I'll lean to you first to see. Okay. There's two parts to that. One, there were a significant number of items on ESSER that were directly related to COVID and COVID supports. Nursing staff, communicable disease staff, etc. So I just wanted to put that out there. And so a decision that we have a much more sustainable path forward for that. So that was one. In terms of the school-based health centers, we are continuing to move forward with that, but we have been able to do that through other funding sources. So we have Get Kids Ahead funding. We just received another grant from DPI that you'll see come forth next Monday. As well as other sources. So between what we were able to shift to local and what we have through other grants, we are still moving forward with that priority work. It's absolutely essential, but it wasn't something that we needed to do an equity project for. We're really trying to build that in through other funding sources.
Okay, and maybe, I don't remember if you've shared this before or not, but, and thank you, Cindy, for kind of the details specifically on school-based health centers. There were some other positions that have been created. I know that they were all related to kind of COVID and COVID recovery, but there were some positions like a digital technology navigator, you know, a housing for unaccompanied youth. And I understand that the funding is ending, and so, you know, we need to evaluate what moves forward. But I think my bigger question is, have you all, is there something that can come to the board, even if it's just in a memo form, about how you all have major decisions and kind of what the plan is, so that if there are families or youth being directly served, there's some kind of a, I guess, transition with those positions ending. I don't know if you have anything that you all documented in your.
So. So what I think I hear you saying, is there a narrative around some of those other positions and pieces that were on ESSER? And maybe what happened to those? Did they get repurposed? Did they find their way somewhere else? Were they cut? Maybe a summary of those types of things that were on ESSER?
That would be helpful. I mean, because I think, at least I will speak for myself. I mean, I knew when we got the amount of ESSER that we got and positions were being created and using it really creatively. that we would come to this day. But there were some positions that were very uniquely created to help families and young people. And so I'm just curious about how you made the decision and then what you think the best plan is moving forward for those folks.
You bet.
Okay. Okay, those were kind of my bigger budget related questions. Let me just pause really quickly and say, I want to thank the community schools Village Builder team. It's super exciting to hear you weave in data, talk about the progress that you all have made. Love the fact that you are bringing forward, you know, kind of quantitative metrics, but also keeping at the core all of the experiential outcomes that are so important with community schools. Love hearing that, yeah, love looking at the diversity of the staff and just the impact that you're having with the program. So there's no but, is like, well done. I see you all like head nodding like, that's coming. No, it was really, really good. Very exciting. I wanted to just ask one thing about the dollars to sustain everything and to expand. Are those dollars solely for staffing, or does it include any programmatic dollars for the resource coordinators or the family liaisons? I just am remembering back that there used to be some initial pot of kind of Fund 80 funds. So I don't know what you needed to maintain or shift, but how are we helping to ensure that the staff also have some resources to do some kind of out of school time and other interesting things for young people and families?
The majority of the funding is staffing.
Okay.
I'm gonna look to Bob to just make sure I say this correctly, because if it's following what we did this year, there is funding that is within that total amount that is for the programs at out of school time for the community school resource coordinators and family liaisons to be able to use. There is also still through title funding for some of our schools, we still do also have the engagement funding that schools receive as well that they can access to.
Okay, so Bob, is there still some Fund 80 available or for staff?
Yes. There is.
Okay, good. That's the right answer. That's the right answer. For the student engagement, let me get back on that step. I mean, on that slide. For the student engagement coordinators. Okay, so there's no changes there. It's just literally in terms of change in FTE. It's, so any of the budget shifts are just literally due to annual increases at the kind of wage line. Okay, got it. Yeah. I think that was it. I mean, I'm super happy to see how far you all have continued to like build it out, and love seeing some of the data that you're able to like attribute to the schools that are designated as community schools. And yeah, just the stories that you brought forward, you know, about the impact that Village Builders are having. And how you all have been really thoughtful about thinking about the schools that are ATSI, but also TSI, and then really thinking about what is kind of the preventative, proactive engagement that's needed. So, you know, I really appreciate the presentation. Love the grow your own as well. I don't have any budget related questions other than the ones that I just asked. So thank you.
Board Member Simkin.
So I just want to start by just sharing some really deep appreciation for everything that you brought forward tonight. If I was on the other side of the table and I was making proposals, these are the things that I feel are incredibly important for our students and for our district. And so I feel just in deep alignment with what you brought forward. I love community schools and the Village Builder program. I can see how like really carefully you're looking to allocate staff next year to address situations that have come forward this year in a way that is, you know, we're moving away from equity and or from equality and moving towards equity. And I can see that that's what you've built into this. And the other pieces, I know I've said a number of times throughout the last like year and a half, come to us if staffing isn't enough in certain places. And I feel like that's what just happened tonight. And so I feel like I could really support the idea of bringing forward extra staff for mental health support and additional classroom staff where they're needed. So I only have 2 questions and they're just about the details because I just want to know. One is you mentioned collective leadership a few times, but you didn't really describe what does that mean in your community schools? And I'm really curious if and how teachers are wrapped into decision making. And then my second question is around the village builders. And when our principal from Lakeview came on and was talking about village builders providing small group instruction, that wasn't the original vision that I remember being brought forward to us. So I'm really interested to know what the village builder role has maybe turned into.
I can start us off, and that's a really great question around the collective leadership piece, right? So that's really around the steering committees. And if you remember, Adam stated on, sorry, I don't know the slide that he did, talking about our steering committees were going to be up and running by the end of this year. So that the steering committees for community schools are really part of the decision-making body. So each school has a school-based steering committee that's made up of community stakeholders, parents, teachers, and other staff within the building. And then there is a district steering committee as well that has that same type of representation, but at the district level. And so that's really the next level that we need to implement to really be fully on our way to being back on track with community schools. A part of their work and a really key critical part of their work is the needs and assets assessment. And so that team, along with, again, family and staff just within the building as a whole, build out, we can talk about the needs and assets because they've already started this. What are the needs of the school, but also what are the assets of the school that will help us to address those needs that exist? And so then the steering committee then goes through and they identify like their top 3 priorities for the school. And the hope is that that really goes hand in hand with the school improvement plan for the schools so that we're weaving in what we already have in place as a district with what is needed to have a successfully transformative community school system for our buildings.
Aletra summed it up pretty well, but for the needs and assets assessment to be considered complete, you have to hit at least a 70% return rate for each one of the categories. So they're all separate. So families is a category, staff, students, because their input and their voice is equally important. And we want to make sure that we're hearing from at least 70% of them. Like Carrie mentioned before, all of our schools are somewhere in between 83 and 93% complete right now. So we met and exceeded our goal. And the next step is to go through all the data and present it back to all of those bodies for their input. This is what we found. Is this correct? Is this where our school community should be moving next year? And then like Carletra said, it would inform their school improvement plans for next year.
And then to your second question around how village builders are.
Oh,
Of
sorry.
course.
The other,
yeah.
sorry, the other
There's too
piece
many
for
great things to say.
for the shared leadership is also making sure that schools are also implementing parent voice as well, like on their school-based leadership teams too. And so even those systems that we have just at a local level in schools, how are we making sure that we are bringing families and staff to the table? Sorry.
No, you're fine. And to your second question, so I'll kick it off as far as the village builders and what it looks like for how they support instruction in elementary. And then I'll pass it to Adam for the secondary side. So we have taken all of our data, all of our assessments, all of our screeners, and our principals have worked really purposely with their coaches and then the school-based leadership teams around what does an instructional diet look like for our students. So based on our middle of year data, they then worked with their SBLT team to see, we've got all these amazing adults in our building. How are we all touching and wrapping ourselves around our children, but also giving them things that they specifically need? We're also really grateful because a lot of our village builders are parents themselves and even parents within our system. And the parent is the first teacher. And so already capitalizing on what their unique talents and gifts that they already bring to us. And then thinking about how do we develop and support them so that they can also help us instructionally. So being at any school, walking around, you'll see village builders help out the kid, supporting them with their writing, supporting them with Alexia on their computer, fully utilizing all the amazing adults that we have in our building. So that's what it looks like on the elementary side. And we've been really fortunate that our village builders have wanted to take on instructional leadership too, because they know how important it is for our students to read and to do the rest of school well too. Adam?
Yeah, no, thanks for the question. I think to add on to what Associate Superintendent Tubbs has shared about the elementary schools, in their job description, it's supporting our early literacy efforts. And so how that looks, we didn't necessarily dictate how that looks because we were piloting this work. So that's why we've tried working really closely with principals, with associate superintendents, with teachers, getting into the classrooms for observations with them and to see what works. And it's been fun to see their own creativity to come up with something like Ms. Davis has at Thoreau, where there are those sorts of groups that can split out to make sure there is a bit more individualized learning attention for the students, and especially when they're focusing on catching students up who have maybe had some inconsistent attendance. We have worked with the curriculum instruction department. Some colleagues in our department have worked with them to create a modified letters training that we use with all of our tutor volunteers throughout the district. And so we've been able to give that modified letters training to all of our village builders as well on a number of PD days. And so that way, all of our staff is aligned and moving in the same direction and speaking the same language.
Okay. Board Member Moser Feltham.
Thanks. Thanks for the presentation. That was beautiful. I have 3 questions. One is super technical, and the other ones are not. The first one is that I saw that the student engagement specialists, you've got 9 for secondary schools, but there's 16. Are you finding that that's working?
Yeah, so we have, the position was designed to serve the comprehensive school feeder patterns. We also wanted to, because they're in the secondary, like middle schools and high schools.
Yeah.
We also wanted to make sure our alternative schools, Capital and Shabazz, were also receiving similar services and mentorship, knowing that there are still some touch points with comprehensive community, high school communities. And so we've been able to spread some of them out into those communities for that ongoing mentorship and intentional connection with their families.
Seems like not enough people. To me.
Like to approve more money.
I know. So that's actually a really nice segue, because this was like a really beautiful pitch for really beautiful work. And I'm certainly not asking you to be like, now here's a like, but I do want to see a whole picture. So I'm curious, like, what's not working yet? Where are you finding like we don't know how to go forward with this piece, or a piece that you're like, we didn't put this in our next phase because it's not ready. I'm just trying to get a fuller picture of the whole thing. And I hope that you really understand, like, super not trying to get you to trash your work. It's beautiful. I'm just trying to see the whole thing.
You're speaking still to the student engagement
No,
specialist?
no, in the holistically, yeah.
I'll just start off and say holistically, one of the things that we're struggling with right now is that we've had several requests for schools to become community schools.
Oh, it's too good.
It's too good. We're not gonna take the other, it's too good, no. But we have had several requests for schools to become community schools, and figuring out what that means as our next step.
Right.
As far as funding, as far as selection, and just as far as capacity. Because like I said before, we are a small but mighty team in central office doing the work. But I think that is our biggest piece, is really addressing that question to schools that have already started approaching us, to be able to have the opportunity to be a community school.
Okay. If that's all you want to say, that's fine. Or unless people are like, yeah, I do want you to know what would be like the next.
I think for our village builders and student engagement specialists, you know, it was somewhat unintentional, but a pleasant surprise to see many of them being inspired to want to become teachers. Their work in the classroom and the fulfillment of that work has been really inspirational for them. And so that's why they're pairing this with the Grow Your Own Equity Project, going on to associate's degree to then eventually transfer into UW, while they have the teacher pledge funding. We think is a great grow your own grassroots pipeline into our teaching workforce. The student engagement specialist, the position really was designed for upward mobility and a developmental position. So that's why it's slightly higher wage than many of our other entry-level positions, and really is recognizing the intangibles that they bring just authentically, and recognizing that, and how can we then invest in them through a lot of intentional and strategic professional development opportunities, and grow your own investments, to help them with all the just technical aspects of our complex education system and the degree requirements that open other doors and opportunities in our system. And so getting traction on what are all of the grow your own opportunities in the district, what fits where they're at in life, family stage, the demands on their time, right, and energy, other jobs that they have. And so how can we work, create a program that accommodates all of those entry points that they would be coming into a Madison College program? How can we accommodate that so they can still be successful, still impact our scholars in our schools? And so wrestling with that, and that's why Jen has proposed the program that she has.
I have one more for you because we're in an operations meeting. Funding is a barrier. A lot of our partner districts aren't funded by their districts. Not to say that we don't want you to fund it, but they're funded by their partner agencies. They pay for their staffing, they pay for their budgets. So getting to a point where our community can support us with not just resources, but funds to take care of the staff, that would really accelerate our expansion plan into our schools. But we're just not there yet. So
I would add with our amazing response rate for our needs and assets surveys that Carrie Motobiloff alluded to, high 80s, 90s. It's taken a tremendous amount of time. And we didn't envision that at first, right? And I think us also thinking really thoughtfully going into next year, how we triangulate that with our culture and climate surveys. We've got a lot of surveys, and also with surveys, it takes time to fully analyze that. And I would also say too, with it, now that they're doing so much work instructionally too, the follow-up that occurs to make sure like we're engaging around attendance and then engaging around the survey completion. It just, there's only so much time in the day. So that has been taxing.
I really appreciate all of those answers. It does give me a fuller picture. And then the last thing, so you've got this like collaborative decision-making thing that's super cool. And surely those groups of people come up with stuff that they want that's like not, we can't do it, right? It's their policy or it's a bajillion dollars, like whatever. I want you to reassure me that all of those big dreams are like in a file where like, when we're thinking about the future and like hoping for big, great things that we're like, oh yeah, we actually already heard all of these things. So it just be like, yes, of course, we're keeping track of all of these ideas.
Yes, there's a Google Doc.
Cool.
And then there's also dreams around all the grants that we can also continue to engage with. So, but there's a Google Doc.
Great. And I asked just, I'm glad to hear that. Sometimes I'm like, okay, we're doing a project. Can't do that, can't do that. And then like I forget. And they're like, oh, and I go back and say, what do you think? They're like, we did you last year. But you didn't take notes. I appreciate that. So thank you. I'm all set.
Okay. I have 3 questions. Wondering, so seems like I think a lot of us have the vision that every Title I school, every school in the district could be a community school one day. At least that's a worthy vision. I'm wondering if y'all can explain the process for identifying and choosing the next community schools.
So I think that is, like I alluded to earlier, that's like our next step in deciding what that will be. It's been done in 2 different ways, right? So in the very beginning, when community schools were selected, there was an application process, and schools had to apply to be a community school. We did a little different process due to ESSER funding, and those are one-time funds. And so we really wanted to be intentional around how can we use that funding to not only utilize the strategies of community schools to support school needs, but also be intentional around using that funding for ATSI schools or schools that had identifications for ATSI. Because again, this is an evidence-based strategy, and a lot of the work of community schools addresses the ESSA exit criteria for schools.
Got it. Shout out to Kennedy Cougars. I'm wondering if y'all, okay, next question. But wondering if y'all have any, and it's kind of related to board member Vandermillen's question, but if y'all have any top line district ratio numbers for school psychs and social workers. I know that we've either maintained or reduced those ratios in the past and hopefully keep that momentum moving forward. But if not now, it's something that I'd be looking for in the future.
So just so I'm capturing it correctly, we're wondering about social workers in school, like the school site, okay. We can definitely look for that, for you. It is, I would caution us to take each of those individual categories, in sort of their peer ratios. Because, we do have, right, both psych and social work and in some schools counselors. So it will require a little bit longer of an answer. So we will get something to you, but we want to give you just a bit more context versus just a ratio, because I think sometimes those peer ratios can be a little bit misleading. So we'll get something to you. I'll work with the team on when we can put that together, Sabian.
Thank you. Last two, one comment, one question. So a lot of the investments we're talking about tonight is supporting the whole child. I'm wondering if anyone can speak to how some of these new positions will also help us kind of tackle the truancy issues the district is endeavoring to solve.
I can start unless Carletta, I didn't know if your team was going to start. It's hard for me being virtual, but I'm happy to start answering that question if you want.
Go ahead, Cindy.
So I think in a few ways, Savion, so thank you for the question. I think the additional social workers that we want to ask for and include are a crucial part to our work around attendance. Our lead social workers and our all of our schools really have put together what we call attendance teams, and they've been working hard on thinking through strategies to not only keep students at school, but also bring students to school that might not be attending on a regular basis. I think that in addition to that, as Carletta's team mentioned, the work of our village builders as well as our student engagement specialists are also key to being able to make those connections in the community with our families, with our students. So I think that kind of trifecta approach that we have will definitely continue to work on that. I think we're seeing some of those impacts already this year in terms of where we've done some really targeted outreach. We've also leveraged the county as much as possible, but we know that our greater impact is when families and students know the individuals that are reaching out and have a trusting relationship.
Yeah, and I'll give a shout out to the principals. So every principals meeting, which are monthly, we're reviewing attendance as an ATSI cohort and celebrating our growth. And then from there in my school visits, and then Sreed is also meeting with the community schools staff at the same time. And then we also have Cesar and Adam at schools too. We're going over attendance data and then saying, what are our pain points? What does your cohort look like? Who are the students you have the biggest connection with, or the families that you know because you are already a part of the village, and then where you're struggling. I'll also give a shout out to Joanna Whitrock, our district social worker for elementary. She has been a great partner in this and helping us to consult around some of our families that have persistent attendance challenges due to a number of factors, affordable housing, you know, all the things that we all see and live every day in our county. But I think the always analyzing data and thinking about where are we seeing improvement and what strategy do we take, and then who owns which kids, that has really helped us in supporting families.
Thank you.
And then I have one real-time strategy, the walking school bus. So Lakeview launched that pilot this year. We're currently walking over 70 kids to school every day. So I wish New was still here. No, the exact rates, like attendance rates for Lakeview, but they've skyrocketed. So much so that we're gonna be doing the same for summer semester. And Lakeview and Mendota are gonna be partnering to bring kids from Northport and Packers to summer school this year. So it's something that I dream for all of the community schools to be able to do, because 70 kids to school on time is amazing. And they're walked by staff, parents, volunteers. Our partner from American Family Insurance comes to volunteer. So it's really a community effort to get all the kids to school, and it's early in the morning and they do it every single day. So they've been doing it all winter. And it's really a testament to what it looks like when the community can come together for the kids.
Wow, thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, the last comment I wanted to plug, I know that some of our most consistently hard to fill positions are bilingual educators, staff in Title I schools. And so excited about the grow your own program, leveraging partnership with UW and Edgewood. I also know that UW and Edgewood both have pretty robust bilingual education programs too. So hopefully we can leverage that promise there. So thank you. Okay. All right, Bob or Lisa, any closing words? Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, wait, no, there was technically one more slide on the slide deck.
Next.
Yeah, it's just a recap of our next steps, but you know, we're gonna continue the good work that we started tonight and we've been doing for months.
Okay, sorry, I thought we wanted to get through the last, okay, well, next steps, yeah, March, okay, all right, yeah, thank you. We have one more slide. All right, may I please get a motion to adjourn?
I'm going to adjourn.
Second, Maya.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Hi.
Okay.
Thank you all.
This was beautiful. Thank you. Have a good night.